Ladies and gentlemen, if you'll start toward a seat, we'll begin the meeting in about 1 minute. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll begin the regular meeting of the Destin City Council for November 6th. If I could ask Reverend Wayne Brown of the Destin United Methodist Church to please come to the podium and deliver the invocation. Would you all please stand?
Almighty God, our Heavenly Father, God, we take a moment to pause to remember what's happened in Texas in the last couple of days. And though distance separates us, humanity does not. And so, God, we pray for comfort in the midst of a great tragedy and loss. We pray that you would draw near to the brokenhearted and that you would bring helping hands around to be community in a time of grief. But we look to you to heal hearts as only you can do. And we gather for this city council meeting. We pray in this moment that we would give you thanks and that we would seek your guidance. Thank you for the gift of life, and thank you for the opportunity to call this amazing city, Destin, our home. And we thank you for the opportunity to serve the people of our city. In the scriptures, you've said that citizens should obey the governing authorities since you have established those authorities to promote peace and order and justice for all. So we pray that you would help us to that end. And now we pray for our mayor. We pray for our city council members and city officials that you would bless them, that you would bless their family, and you would bless them as they fulfill their callings. We ask tonight that you would help us all in this room to act with character and with conviction, to listen with understanding and with goodwill, that you would give us a spirit of service, that you would guide us to be the leaders that your people need in this time and in this place, and that you'd help us see the humanity and the dignity of those we disagree with, to treat all persons, no matter their standing, with reverence that your creation deserves. I pray for the agenda that's set before them this evening, that you would give them the assurance of what pleases you and what would be for the flourishing of the people that live and work in and around this city. And finally, Father, we pray that you would renew us with the strength of your presence and the joy of getting to help build a flourishing and life-giving community and a residence for all who live here and our guests who come here to seek renewal and rejuvenation in this Emerald Coast area. We ask this as your sons and daughters, confident in the goodness of your love expressed to us in Jesus. And it's in his name we pray. Amen.
Thank you. Councilmember Marler, would you lead us in the pledge?
Yes, sir. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Council members, I believe you've had time to look at the agenda. Is there anything that you would like to change on the agenda or pull off of the consent agenda? Not seeing any. I assume that's an affirmation that we'll go through the agenda as, well, I think I need a vote on that.
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve. Second?
Yep.
Well, there we go. Mr. Morgan? Unanimous, yes. What would be the council's pleasure? Is there any changes or recommended additions to the minutes? If we could approve all three with one vote, or you can approve them individually. Any changes?
Motion to approve.
Is that all three?
All three.
I'll second.
I have a motion. I have a second. Discussion? No discussion. Call for the vote. Unanimous, yes. It's my pleasure this evening to give a proclamation to two very deserving gentlemen. They are both charter boat captains who teamed up to save stranded divers out in the Gulf. This is quite appropriate because if you'll look at the top of our meeting agenda tonight, the city's core value listed for the month of November is teamwork. The actions of these two boat captains during the late afternoon on October 15th may have very well saved the lives of these divers. Tonight, I'd like to acknowledge and thank them for their life-saving efforts with a proclamation. If I could have Captain Robert Hill and Captain Justin Destin join me down at the podium, please, in the front. Thank you. Let's go. Divers out there. Destin, am I on? Come around here and stand beside me. Whereas in the late afternoon of October 15, 2017, two charter boat captains teamed up to save stranded divers out in the Gulf of Mexico. And whereas Robert Hill, captain of the charter boat Twilight, and Justin Destin, captain of the charter boat Unreal, came across two divers floating 21 miles out in the Gulf after their boat drifted away from them. And whereas the divers had lost sight of their boat, which had broken down and drifted more than a mile away, there were no other boats around, and one of the divers was seen waving a red flag and a wand. And whereas Captain Hill pulled the divers from the water and brought them to their boat, which had two other young men on it. And whereas Captain Destin towed the boat for about an hour before the occupants got it running again. Now therefore be it proclaimed that I, Mayor Scott Fisher, on behalf of the Destin City Council, city staff, and the citizens of Destin, do hereby acknowledge and sincerely thank Captain Robert Hill and Captain Justin Destin for their life-saving efforts, and do wholeheartedly extend our appreciation and gratitude for the opportunity to celebrate such outstanding individuals. So done this 6th day of November, 2017.
We only did what everybody else in this room would do. We didn't do anything special.
I don't think anyone bought that, did you? Jeff, would you like to announce our next speaker and take the floor for after his presentation?
Well, Mayor, he doesn't really have a presentation. He's here more to answer any questions the council may have. But Chef Wright, our expert for the Gulf Power negotiations, is here tonight because we met last week, and as you know, the council directed me to kind of take charge of the negotiations with Gulf Power, and this was my first meeting with anyone on the team, and we actually met with Carice and yourself, as you're aware. And in that meeting, an idea was formed, kind of, and I'll call it the Foreman Doctrine or the Foreman Plan, but apparently Councilman Foreman came up with this plan independently of us at the same time. But It's kind of right in the middle of the two options that the city's been pursuing. There's the one option the city's been pursuing to exercise the option and take over the utility and actually run the power company as its own. And then the other option was just to negotiate with Gulf Power. And then a third option we kind of discussed, and apparently is viable according to Chef Wright, is that the city could bid out its option for the utility and not actually take the utility over, but essentially sell that to another utility like one of the other many electric utility companies in the state of Florida. And that would essentially create a bidding situation on that option. And I believe Chef Wright can kind of go into more of the details, but he's indicated that if the city is interested in doing this, it would be very clear that the city would exercise the option and simultaneously sell its rights to the power utility to whoever the winning bidder would be for it. And I believe tonight we're going to ask the council for a motion to allow Chef Wright to prepare bid documents. He's going to look into whether or not it'll be an RFP or an RFQ, but to then disseminate that to all the utility companies throughout Florida to receive bids on wanting to be the new power company for the city of Destin. And so we're here tonight to get a motion on that. And Chef Wright, he's the expert. He'll be able to answer any questions y'all might have.
Mr. Wright, would you mind coming to the podium in case there are questions? I do have one quick one of you, Jeff, that this would not be an absolute auction. The council would have the right to reject all bids and go back to do another process if they were unhappy with the results.
Correct. Actually, what we're going to be asking tonight to do is to basically put out a contingent RFP or RFQ, however Chef decides it has to be done. But the city would simultaneously continue negotiations with Gulf Power, and if those negotiations are completed before the end of the process, or if they're completed at the exact same time the presentations are done by the other power companies, then the city would then make a choice between essentially the three options. And at that point, either to buy, to go with a new third-party power company, or to just stay with Gulf Power. So no, the city would not be locking itself into this route. Essentially, it'd be opening up a whole third avenue at that time.
If I could ask one question and kind of lead you off, or do you have anything you're prepared you want to start with? Ask a question.
Mr. Mayor, I'm at your service.
Oh, turn your microphone on. And please give your name and address for the record.
My full name is Robert Scheffel-Wright. I'm a partner in the law firm Gardner, Bist, Bowden, Bush, D. Lavia, and Wright. I've been working on energy matters in Florida for, that'll be 37 years next month. And I'm proud to be here, and I'm happy to answer. And as I said, I'm at your service. I'm happy to answer any questions. I do have a couple of things to say, but I'll answer your question first.
I guess a few citizens of Destin have asked me very pointedly, both publicly and privately, give them one good reason why we'd even want to go through this process. And to me, I know council has many reasons, but to me, glancing at it, we're paying almost the highest rates in the state of Florida. And I can't imagine the citizens of Destin not wanting the council to at least make an effort to bring them more economical power. I think a home like mine, if I looked at the rates correctly, I'd save over $400 a year if, say, a company like Florida Power and Light would be the high bidder, or the negotiated participant.
That's a very good question that leads exactly into what I wanted to say about the proposal that's before you this evening, which is to issue some form of solicitation document, whether it would be a request for proposals, request for qualifications, or invitation to negotiate, or something along those lines remains to be filled out. I do want to clarify one thing that Mr. Burns said. This will not be, in my view of the world, and there's some technical legal reasons that I don't need to go into tonight, I'm happy to, would not be a simple sale of the option. There would actually be a transaction by which the city of Destin would exercise its contractual right to purchase all the assets of Gulf Power Company that are used and useful in serving citizens in Destin, and then a resale either momentarily or maybe some short time thereafter. But the net result, hypothetically, could be that another utility would serve. The answer to your question is essentially what you said, that the one good reason to start with is that for all practical purposes, and I can give you more detail than anybody wants, I'll tell you. I've been doing this a long time. I was the rates guy at the PSC for a few years. Gulf's rates, for all practical purposes, are the highest in the state of Florida. The only two, for a typical, an average Gulf Power Company residential customer, the only two utilities, which consumes 980 kilowatt hours a month. The standard yardstick is 1,000 kilowatt hours a month, and that's what we're talking about here. The only two companies in the state of Florida that presently have rates higher than that, two utility systems, are Florida Public Utilities Company and the City Key West, Keys Energy. Every other muni, every co-op, and all three of the other significant investor-owned power companies, Florida Power and Light, Duke Energy Florida, and Tampa Electric Company, all have rates that are lower. And in some cases, it's not by a little bit. Florida Power and Light Company's rates are $35 per 1,000 kilowatt hours less per month than Gulf Power's. That's $420 a year. Tampa Electric Company's rates are $33 less per month. Duke Energy's are $19 less per month, but you add that up over a year, it's $230. Winter Park, which just happens to be something that some folks have focused on around here because it was the last municipality to acquire its system. It also happens, just coincidentally, it happens to be the municipal electric system that has closest to the number of customers in Destin. They have about just under 15,000. Destin has just over 15,000. Winter Park's rates are $28 a month less than Gulf Power's. So there's your one good reason. And what I would say to you, and this is what I was going to say, is all we're proposing to the city this evening is to take this important due diligence step in identifying and evaluating what the city's options might be in doing what you said, Mayor, and that is to do what probably your folks want you to do, and that is ensure that you get safe and reliable electricity at the lowest possible cost. This is an important step to identify and evaluate what options you have. You still got the option to execute a franchise with Gulf Power. You still would have the option, and I know, maybe not what people want to do here, but you still have the option to buy it and operate it yourself. If you decide that that's what you want to do, you may have the option to buy it and resell it to another substantial power company. This is the same exact analysis that Gulf Power would do, that any other utility would do, and that any other business would do if that entity had the business opportunity that the city of Destin has to act on its energy future here.
Thank you. Councilmember Destin.
Hit the button, sorry.
Councilmember Dixon.
I kind of want to know where we are with the last meeting that we discussed this. We talked about the possibility of hiring a company to come in and do the, to make sure that the first company that we had to give us a price on this, they gave us accurate numbers. So we're going to have a lot of RFPs running around out there, and that's one of the questions I have on what we're doing here. So has that RFP went out? Do we know what's going on with that, or are we talking about doing something different, or what?
The RFP that the council had approved to go out is temporarily being held to see what direction the council wanted to go at this point. We can put an RFP out if the council decides to pursue the purchase and operations. But at this point, with the third option, the team felt that it was perhaps prudent to wait and put that RFP out after this meeting to see what the council's desire was. If the council wanted to RFP to see if there was another existing power company that was interested and wanted to pursue that option, then it would not be fiscally responsible to hire a consultant to do the other one. The other option, the other RFP, was based upon the council wanting to purchase and run it. But it's still in the works. It was a matter of timing to see what direction the council wanted to take at this time.
Okay, just throwing a few things out there that you know, I know I voted against that measure at the last meeting, but since then, I got to tell you, Gulf Power has been protecting a bunch. I don't know what, but the mailers that we've been getting, and with the phone calls and the emails and everything, it kind of makes me think, yeah, like this one. Yeah, it kind of makes me think that they're being very protective of that, and you know, so I don't mind looking. You know, it's going to take a lot of convincing for me to vote to change it, but I don't mind looking. You know, and the fact is that it's gotten really bad. Every time people getting phone calls, we're getting emails, like 20, 30, 40 emails a day on this thing, and I know that basically the money that they probably paid so far to get us where we are would probably pay for a mile worth of underground and utilities. So I really don't get, you know, the total onslaught of this negative publicity for the city. And the fact is that we've made no determinations yet. You know, we've not done anything that said we were going to do one or the other. So, you know, my hope is that Gulf Power, whoever is behind the Gulf Power push to do this, calms down a little bit and lets us take a look at everything like we should do for the whole city. And so I'm in support of looking, but it's going to take a lot to convince me to make a change, but I'm in favor of looking.
Yes, sir. If I may, Mr. Mayor, Councilmember, I am at your service. I've been doing this a long time, and I know a whole bunch of stuff about this. All I want you to do, all I would suggest to you, is make the best decision you can, a fully informed decision based on real facts. How much electricity cost? How much could it cost otherwise if you ran it or if somebody else ran it? How much would undergrounding cost with Gulf or with somebody else, or if you did it yourself? Real facts. That's all I'm here for, and that's what I'm all about.
Councilmember Brady.
Thank you, Mayor. I can tell you what they're trying to protect is that millions and millions and millions of dollars that they're making off the citizens of Destin. That's what they're trying to protect. And I mean, that's why they're sending out all the lies and deceiving people. And to me, telling the truth but not the whole truth is just good a line to me. And the one thing is, and I find it hard to believe, but some people do, what is the chance of Destin having the power turned off, Destin going broke, whole city of Destin just blacked out, no power whatsoever because of it?
The chance of the lights being turned off in Destin is zero. You know, barring the meteorite taking out all the Gulf's power plants and all the substations or something crazy like that, they're not going to turn the power off. It'd be a violation of state law. You'd have an injunction within hours, and somebody'd be running it, whether it's Gulf or somebody else. Somebody'd be running it. They would be under a statutory obligation to serve until and unless the transaction, transfer, and ownership of the assets went to the city. You, the city, if you went that way, would either have full staff either under contract or employed in place to run the system. You'd have your power contracts in place, or if you bought it and resold it in a simultaneous buy-sell transaction to another utility company, they would then have the obligation to serve. Lights aren't going to go out, and the idea that the city of Destin is going to go bankrupt is not credible and not supported by any facts. I saw another mailer that referred to the city of Winter Park's debt rating being downgraded. Well, let me tell you the truth about that. And I got this from an interview with their city manager, Randy Knight, and he is a very gracious man. He would be delighted to come speak with you anytime you want to invite him to come. Here's the facts. City of Winter Park's debt was not affected at all. Winter Park's electric debt was downgraded to AA- negative outlook. It sits today at AA- stable outlook. AA- stable outlook is a real good bond rating. It is higher than Gulf Power Company's current bond rating, which is single A- negative outlook. I might have missed one of your other questions, Council Member. If I did, ask it again and I'll tell you.
No, you answered it. I mean, I knew the answer, but there's citizens out there that don't.
Yes, sir.
That were thinking our power could just be shut off at a moment's notice.
Yes, sir.
That's all I have right now, Mayor. Thank you.
Councilmember Foreman.
Thank you, Mayor. I woke up in the middle of the night and I got to thinking, what's wrong with this thing that we're looking at? What are we not doing right? And I got to thinking, we have a way of doing things here that typically serves us well. I mean, with waste management, we put out proposals. We got 3 back. We picked one. We had facts. We had the ability to look at what they were offering to do for us. We had negotiating power. We had the ability to change it if we wanted to. So what we're looking at here, the third option that we're talking about, is simply to follow the same path. To go and to put something out on the street that requires a power company, whatever power company it is, including Gulf Power, and to explain what they're offering to the city of Destin that we can make a decision on. And that's exactly what I think we're doing, is trying to solve this with a more sane approach to it. I mean, all this negative thoughts out there and everything doesn't have to be there. I mean, we have a way of doing it and we can get it done. So I suggest we do that.
Would you like to make that in the form of a motion? Do we have a motion prepared for this?
Mayor, I think we would ask for a motion for Chef Wright and the city attorney to work with staff to come back in 2 weeks with a bid proposal document, set of documents, either invitation to bid or whatnot, and we would bring back within 2 weeks. So we're just looking for authorization tonight through a motion.
Is that clear enough motion? Does anyone have a question? I have a motion. I have a second. We don't normally have public discussion. Excuse me.
I can't make a motion, Mayor. So.
No. I'm sorry. I was assuming that Councilmember Foreman made the motion.
So did I make a motion?
Yeah, you made the motion.
I moved we direct our franchise attorney to prepare a document relating to proposals for the for the city to select a company to operate our power system. I don't know whether that works. It's close
That works.
enough.
And Councilmember Brady, you still second? Councilmember Morgan?
Thank you, Mayor. If we ended up getting a favorable bid back from another company and decided to go with them, would we still have to issue bonds to purchase the utility before we would have a transaction with the other company to buy it back from us?
Council member, you're a little bit out of my particular public utility regulatory area of expertise.
Sure.
But I've done a lot of stuff around financing. I will tell you, without giving you a formal legal opinion on this, I strongly believe that if you got the right bid and the right proposal and you wanted to do it, and we really are talking about a purchase of the assets by the city, and 1 second later, a sale of those assets to somebody else, I'm highly confident that the purchasing entity would have a 1 second bridge loan to the city to cover it that you would not have to issue bonds for. The financing folks are very creative. This could work.
Sure.
Without you issuing bonds.
Okay. And one of my other concerns with just going to the negotiating table with Gulf Power was in their list of agreements with us, one of their stipulations was that they were going to remove the option for us to purchase a utility, which would essentially give Gulf Power a monopoly on our power grid in perpetuity to where we have absolutely no leverage. Well, okay, sure, so in 15 years the franchise agreement comes up again, but we have no option to purchase it. We have no leverage over it. And monopolies are inherently anti-American. And I certainly wish all the public that has been sending us these emails and voicemails were aware of what Gulf Power was trying to achieve. Am I right in this? And that removing that option to purchase from the contract, from the negotiation, would be a bad idea?
There are a couple of questions in there.
Sure.
If you ask me my opinion, having the option in the franchise agreement is a lot better for the citizens of Destin than not having it in there.
Sure.
There's just one technical point, because this is what I do. It would not necessarily be a monopoly in perpetuity, because whenever the next franchise expires, whether it's 10 years, 15 years, or 30 years, you wouldn't have to renew it, and at that point in time, you'd have the option to purchase pursuant to eminent domain proceedings.
Okay.
The option you have in the existing franchise is a lot better than that, because it provides for a determination of the purchase price by an arbitration panel pursuant to Section 180.16 Florida statutes.
Sure. Okay, thank you.
With that clarification, yeah, it's a good idea to keep it in there.
Councilmember Ramswell.
Thank you, Mayor. I actually have two questions / comments. A while ago, you said that obviously we needed to make fully informed, fact-based decisions. One of my greatest concerns is the fact that we have not been given the itemization of the financing needs and costs and all that from the feasibility study. Is this something that you can request, and isn't this unusual? Because personally, I want to know. What size building did they account for? How many employees did they account for? What salary range did they account for? Those are all very, very important and I believe critical questions that get down to the heart of the matter. What are your feelings and thoughts on us not being given that data at this point?
Mr. Mayor, Council Member, I think that's a completely fair question. I don't know whether Mr. Harrington and Mr. Warren went to that level of detail in compiling it. They had a distribution, I'm going from memory quickly, but I think the distribution O&M costs were roughly $2.6 million a year, and the customer service and administrative and general costs were in the vicinity of $2.9 million a year. I may have those numbers backwards, but those were the annual cost numbers in the analysis that they did. I don't know exactly what they did. If I were guessing, I would guess that they made reasonable assumptions. And these are guys with 80-odd years of Florida utility experience. Mr. Harrington was the Vice President of System Planning for Orlando Utilities. Mr. Warren ran Gainesville Regional Utilities. He also ran the City of Winter Park Utility after they acquired it from Florida Power Corporation. it's fair to say that these gentlemen know what they're doing. My guess is that they used some kind of reasonable estimate in their mind for what cost would be to serve a utility system with the footprint of the city of Destin, having 15,600 customers. I doubt that they went to the level of detail, number of employees or something like that. I don't know. I know both of them personally. I'm happy to ask them and see where that leads us.
Certainly, and I'm definitely not calling their credentials into question, but my concern is obviously we're put here to make the best decision we can for our city, and that involves research and looking at some of those little things. Now, you know, that may be a little overboard in terms of that sort of thing, but on the other hand, I'm not so sure it is. But I do feel like we deserve to at least see some of the details of how they arrived at the numbers at which they arrived.
You are the decision maker, and you're entitled to ask for whatever you want to ask for, and I'll do everything I can to get it for you.
Personally, I would appreciate that because that is a huge missing piece of the puzzle, in my opinion. And, you know, if I'm to consider going forward, I need to see information like that. I'm satisfied with the service I'm receiving from Gulf Power, but I don't want to miss an opportunity. If this is going to generate some money that we can do projects and improve the infrastructure and do some great things here in Destin, well, I can't ignore that. But I'm not going to be able to determine that unless I can see something a bit deeper down. So I would appreciate that if you could try to get some of those numbers.
I'll do what I can. I do have to say that may implicate the other RFP that's temporarily on hold to do a vet and refinement, a vetting and a refinement of the work that Mr. Harrington and Mr. Warren did.
So building on what you just said, and this goes to something else I was going to say, in terms of essentially bringing someone else in to vet the material that we've already received and spending however much it would cost to do so, would it not behoove us to bring in folks that are experts elsewhere that already do this to take a look and furnish us with their opinions free of charge because they're interested in helping us do the right thing? Is that something that sounds feasible to you? Bring in someone from Chelco. Bring in someone that, you know,
Now I do. Since you put the other utility expertise in there, let me work on that too.
May I interject? Excuse me. We did reach out to Chelco for that very reason. We wanted to get some real numbers on what it would cost us to run a utility company. We received a letter from Chelco's attorney saying that because of restrictions put upon them by the Public Service Commission, that they would not at this time meet with us. They would, however, consider responding to an RFP.
Okay, thanks for sharing that. That's good input.
And just briefly, the pendency of the RFP may well clear the decks to get input from other utilities along the lines of the question you asked 45 seconds ago, Councilmember.
Okay. No, that's great. I just...
Yeah, this is a lawyer answer, but not... Folks want to be real careful, not to walk into some kind of tortious interference claim, even though it might not have much merit. They want to be real careful. The pendency of the RFP should take that completely out of play, because at that point the city of Destin is reaching out to the world, asking for options.
So from that perspective then, the third option we're looking at right now could be very beneficial because we'd be also garnering some data from them as well. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so then my final point / comment concern is exactly what this direction. What Councilmember Dixon and others have brought up this evening, the fact that we're being bombarded with information, placards, brochures, FedEx letters to my residents. Yes. You know, we at least know what's going on because we're here at the council meetings, but the general public is at a loss. So their insight to all of this is just what has been put out by this organization. And so what I would like to see done, and I don't know if that's something that a government or / city entity can do, or if Preble does it herself, but the people of Destin need to know why we're doing what we're doing and the rationale. I mean, Councilman Morgan brought up one great point that people need to be aware of. This may be our only chance for something like this. No, we're not going to cost you $71 million. No, your lights are not going to go. Just some bullet points that we can get out there. They're doing a heck of a marketing campaign right now, and we're not. And so right now, if we're even looking at other options that could be in the better interest of the city, we still look like the bad guys looking in because they don't see any of the reasons for why we're doing what we're doing. So is this something that we can do as a city? Maybe Doug can put out a list of bullet points. These are the high points, something.
I've already discussed this with Mr. Wright, and he said that he would put together some factual information regarding state statute that we could put into a public service announcement. Other than that, our city public information cannot compete with a PR machine, but we will be happy. We already have a web page. We can put PSA information, public service announcement information, with factual information, but we do not have the wherewithal to send out mailers and FedEx letters.
Well, no, and I didn't mean that, but at least getting something on the website, social media, which is free. You know, those of us that have websites or whatever, get it out that way. But we've got to get the word out that we're not just, you know, the bad guys in this situation. We're doing what you guys elected us to do. We're trying to look at every angle and make the best decision. But they're not hearing that. They're seeing the one side. So I just want to make sure that those salient points are reaching the public and they see the rationale and that they understand we are in negotiations with Gulf Power. We're not just tossing that out the window.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember, I can help you with more factual information than you ever want to see. And that's what you, well, I don't know about that. Maybe you do want to see it all. That's what this needs to be about. It needs to be about facts. I can help with that. I will get with your city attorney and city manager and figure out exactly how we're comfortable getting that out there. But I can handle the facts for you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Oh, I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Mayor, there needs to be public comment before
Yes.
you'll vote.
I have one council member left, and I'll cut it off at that. Councilmember Dixon, do you have a final comment?
No, I just want to emphasize that the vote tonight is not to change to any power companies, not to try to spend any more money than we've already spent to try to justify this. This vote tonight is not saying that we're going to change from Gulf Power. This vote tonight is basically to look at other options.
To add to that, I think I'm as sensitive or more sensitive than any council member about Gulf Power's paid character assassins. But at the same time, I would like to think that we'll try to stay as neutral as we can and not allow this to push us one way or the other, that we're going to get all the data we can get and make an intelligent decision that's best for the citizens of Destin. I'm not out to get Gulf Power. Most of them are pretty nice guys. I kind of like having them around. But at the same time, I don't think the citizens of Destin really need to be paying the highest rates in the state. There's areas we need to negotiate, or we need to at least consider other options. To do so tonight, though, we're going to take a vote. In this particular segment of the city council meetings, we do not normally vote, and it's not normally open for public discussion. If you don't mind taking a seat, did you have another comment? Would you mind taking a seat for a few minutes?
Not at all. I'm at your service.
Be prepared that someone may want to ask you a question, not hear me.
I'm at your service.
But I would like to open this meeting to the public. You do not need to fill out a blue card. If you'll just stand up and give me a wave, I'll invite you to the podium. Any comments from the public directly, try to keep your discussion directly on point as to the proposal that's on the table, the motion that's on the table. Please, did someone, David, come on up.
David Schusler, 100 Gulf Shore Drive, Unit 308, Destin. I thought it was funny as I jumped out of the shower to catch a phone call at about 4:45 this afternoon. It was somebody that wanted to ask me some questions. And it was she said it'd take about 5 or 10 minutes. I said, sure. I said, what's it about? She said, the Gulf Power thing in Destin, Florida. She was real nice. She was lady, I think she was, it doesn't really matter where she was from. But they asked me what I thought about, was I aware of what was going on? And I said, yeah. And she started off with her questions, and they were real nice. You know, it was about, you can agree, strongly agree, sort of agree, or don't agree on about 25 to 30 questions. But I thought it was interesting, a little bit different what I've gotten on these cards also. And I'm not making this up at 4:30 in the afternoon. I'm putting on my shirt ready to come up here, you know. I thought it was funny. She said, are you aware that it's going to cost $76 million? I said, ma'am, can I talk to you about this? Or do you, she said, no, I come to work. They hand me a list of, this is my job. I walk in, punch in, and this is what you ask today on all of the phone calls you make. But I thought it was interesting when they started talking about the city council members, the ones that voted for this last time. She said, she didn't ask if I knew anybody, but she did say that the question was, I'm trying to remember, was, do you agree with the people that voted for this last time? I said, I strongly agree with them. And then she said, well, the mayor, he voted against it, or voted for it, or something like that. Do you agree, strongly agree, disagree, strongly disagree? And I said, fine. But went on for about 25 or 30 minutes, and I asked her, I said at the end, I said, is that all? She said, yes, that's all, thank you for your time. And I said, ma'am, thank you for yours. Now I know what we're up against. And I said, by the way, this conversation was being recorded, which it wasn't. But I just thought, I get with these things too, And like the gentleman that came up a couple of weeks ago on this, he said he was from Winter Park, Winter Garden, whatever the town we're talking about, that has already done this. He said it's going to get worse before it gets better, and this is just the start of it, because they're using campaign companies, robocalling, stuff like that. Thanks for letting me talk.
Thank you. Any other member of the audience wish to speak at this point? Please, sir. Whoop. Ladies first. I'll correct that. And again, your name and address before you start, and I know we all know you.
Lee Moore, representing Howard Group. And I just want to say that really we support 100% you all exploring all possible options in this situation. Such an important opportunity for the city and the citizens. And just want to commend you for being willing to do that and to wade through the not so positive feedback that you may have gotten, are getting, and will get. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
I think this opportunity that we have to purchase our utility company is exciting. I think it's one of the best things that Destin's had come along in quite a while. It gives us an opportunity to break free of being constantly without money. If we end up, it looks like from listening to the consultants, we could end up with $3 or $4 million per year in our coffers. That opens up a huge panorama of things we can do for our city. And I think it's great that we have this opportunity. I'm glad we're negotiating. I'm glad we're looking at all three options. But I just soon buy the thing, get rid of Gulf Power, because I don't like them. I think that we have not been well served. They have, you know, I do the community garden over at Iron American Legion. And they really made me angry when they, if you do an overhead drop, it's free. My power pole was 30 feet from their power pole. They charged me over $500. And I dug the trench, I laid the conduit. All they had to do was run the wire. And I talked to them, I says, why? You know, we have to pay contractors. Well, I really think that I'm not the only one that's been abused, and I don't like them. So I just soon get rid of them. Thank you.
Sir, I don't think I got your name.
I'm sorry, I'm Ron Sandstead.
Thank you, sir.
Yes.
Just please state your name when you do come up, because this is our record for of the meeting, and even though I may know your name, I need to have you state your name and address. Guy?
Honorable Mayor, thank you. Honorable Mayor and Councilors, I'm Guy Tadlock. I live on 502 Noriega. You know, I really encourage the council to keep looking at this opportunity, and I look at it as an opportunity to give the citizens of Destin at least some options to get less expensive power. I lived in a community before I moved down here, and the city that I lived in was served by Alabama Power, which is a sister company of the Southern Company and of Gulf Power. In the adjacent city, the utility was owned by the city. And the two little communities side by side, and typically the utility that was provided by the city was less expensive than Alabama Power. Not a lot, but in the long run, it was maybe 5 to 10 to 15% less expensive. But the interesting thing about it is that the level of service didn't seem to be any difference between the two. Relative to maintaining the electricity or maintaining services to the house, to the homes. But one of the things that I've noticed, and I encourage all of the citizens of Destin to look at it, is that you'd be surprised at how much work that Gulf Power contracts out. In our subdivision, typically you see a company called Mastech doing most of the work. If the trees are being trimmed, it's by another company, Asplunk or something like that. And lately, I've seen Chelco do work. So obviously, the power company is subcontracting out quite a bit of that as well. But I certainly encourage you to look at it. Right now, it's a monopoly. None of us like monopolies. Monopolies are never good. But this gives us an opportunity to see if there's a possibility that we might can get power at a lower rate. So I encourage you and I applaud you for doing what you're doing. And I think it's a shame that the Southern Company and Gulf Power is going down the tactics they are, making it very difficult for you guys to go through and make a decision. And I would really encourage you to put out as much factual information as you can. I know I ran into a lady at the service station the other day, and she made the comment, said, I can't believe the city of Destin's trying to buy Gulf Power. And I said, ma'am, the city's not trying to buy Gulf Power. I said, Gulf Power can buy the city. But I said, you know, we're looking at, which is the right by federal regulations for the city to take over the distribution of electricity and possibly save you money. Boy, she was very interested at that point. So let's see if we can get as much facts as we can out there and hopefully allow you guys to make a good decision for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any further comments? I haven't seen any other hands go up. Yes, sir.
Curtis Gwynn. I live at 4 Weeki Wachee Circle here in Destin. I don't think anybody here that gets a power bill would have any problems if our power bills that came every month were lower. You know, I mean, that's just a given. You know, and I appreciate the fact that we're looking at all the options that we have in front of us as a city. I remember, I don't know whether you remember, the last time I got up and talked about this was that the first public hearing you had on it. I said that I'd worked with Gulf Power and Chelco over 30 or 40 years that I've been in the area, and I worked with one power company that was a nightmare that I had to work with. And you know, I found it interesting that the gentleman that came up from Winter Haven, I think that's correct, is that right, Winter Haven? Oh, it was Winter Park. Oh, okay. Worked for Progress Energy. And after he made his spiel and everything, I thought it was interesting how he got up here to begin with, but he made his spiel and talk about it and everything. And, you know, if I had been Winter Park and had to deal with Progress Energy, I would have bought it too. And I would suggest if the city of Destin was, you know, in the service area of Progress Energy, that we ought to really look hard at buying it. So that didn't surprise me, but you know, we need to look, first of all, our service area, we have about 13,000 citizens in Destin, permanent residents. I think Winter Park is, what, 3 or 4? Does anybody know what the difference in size of population in the service area is? Winter Park's a lot bigger than Destin, I think. So, you know, that cost is spread out. They get a lot more money in on a monthly basis from service. And secondly, I found it interesting that the cost estimates that initially went in to buy that system wound up going up by, I think it was at 15.8 and wound up costing 56 million. So I'd say look real hard, like you were talking about, at the cost going into this thing, and because right now you're projecting 71 million, if I'm correct. You know, if that goes up by 3 times, then you're not going to be able to sell bonds because they're not going to be AAA rated and all that sort of stuff. I have no problems with negotiating with Gulf Power to get power bills down. I think it's a good thing that we have that window of opportunity. I would leave the things in like Chatham was talking about that give you some options, and it's not just locked in for the next 15 or 30 years. So just be real careful and look very hard at the costs going into this thing, so we're not shooting ourselves in the foot and winding up with something that's costing us 3 or 4 times more. Thank you.
Oops, excuse me. I didn't see any other hands going up, so we'll go back to the discussion among the council unless they're ready for a vote. I would throw one thing out. This difference in price, by the way, I don't want you trying to make anyone feel sorry for us, but you're overpaid city council. This is how much data I've accumulated so far. These are nothing but tables from the state of Florida on what power comes out at. I'm not a typical 1,000 kilowatt hour house. For some reason, my bills are 2,500 or above. Oh, my home. Kilowatt, excuse me. And but yeah, a generator would be a whole lot cheaper. But I was trying to figure out an average on 15 million, and I'm going to ask Chef if he has an argument with my numbers, because I think I stole some of them from him as well. But this number's of $30 a month savings or $40 a month. But when you really get it down to 15,000 customers, we're talking 9 million difference in billing per year. Am I close on that? I'll give you one last shot before we vote. That would be for all 15,000 customers in the city of Destin.
Thank you. You're definitely in the ballpark, and it would depend on what was what. What I have done is I have taken a look at average retail revenue for all retail kilowatt hours sold, and I've looked at that for Gulf, FPL, Duke, and Tampa Electric Company. Gulf is the highest if you were served by FPL, and making the fairly reasonable assumption that excuse me, that the composition of the load by rate class was the same. Technically, if you had a disproportionate amount of industrial or residential load, it could throw it off a little bit. But if you just make the reasonable assumption that the load composition is comparable, FPL would, Gulf cost about $9 million a year more than if the same customers were served by FPL at FPL's rates. It's about $6 million today versus Duke. No, sorry, it's about $4.5 million versus Duke. It's about $6.5 million versus Tampa Electric. Duke's rates are going up in January significantly, so are Gulf's. I've got that information too. But you're definitely in the right ballpark, Mayor. And just real quickly, the population of Winter Park is 30,200, 2016 estimate. They've got right at 15,000 electric customers. Destin apparently has a population around 13,000, but you got 15,600 electric customers. So in terms of comparability, number of customers is a better predictor of cost, et cetera, than population is. I will say I believe that to be true.
The 13,000, of course, is census year-round, and Destin has a very high percentage of our population.
Yes, sir.
That are part-time residents, and they're not counted in Destin.
There you go.
They have
Okay.
homes here.
Yep. Did I get your question?
You did. Yes, sir. Any final comments that you would have before I call for a vote?
No, sir.
Mr. Councilmember Marler?
Yep. Jumping on what Preble was saying earlier, another thing that we need to look at also is the way that the distribution is right now, because Gulf Power takes care of everything. You're also looking at what is the cost to follow the city limits.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, because you've got lines that cross over into the county that come back into the city because of the way the distribution is. So that's going to be another factor in price and cost, because you're going to be cutting lines and rerouting lines.
Yes, sir.
That was all in the pro forma.
Okay, all right. Well, I just want to make sure that's
already
done.
been
And
accounted
the other is just a comment. I feel like Kmart and Sears, and we know where that's going right now. So I just, it just doesn't. No matter what we do, something's gonna mess up something along the line. But I agree that we should do the RFPs. Well, Kmart bought Sears, and look where we're at with them, if you're not familiar with what's going on. Neither of them are doing any good.
Glad I don't have it. If there's no further discussion, I'm going to call for the vote.
I'll explain later.
Mr. Foreman, Mr. Dixon, are you abstaining? You thought we were taking a break.
I didn't hear you say
Vote is a unanimous yes. Thank you. I'll try to be clearer next time.
Thank you.
Thank you. No further questions or comments on this matter. We'll move on to the public comment section of our meeting. Anyone with a blue card? I only have one at the moment, and that's it. Would Mr. Shane Moody come forward? He's going to speak on the short-term rentals.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. I'm here to talk about the short-term rental task force you all are thinking about putting together. I think that's a great idea. The Chamber appreciates your efforts in doing that. And we just want to encourage you to please consider some of the highly respected rental managers, rental company owners that are in this community to put on that task force. They can really give you some great information, help lead you to the good, proper solutions that we need for the short-term rentals. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll move to short-term rental task force appointments. I'm not sure how council would like to do this. Shall I just go down the podium and ask for your...
It's under 3.
Excuse me. I'm stealing the city manager's thunder, which I should never do. Yes, Miss... Would you... Ms. Lejeune, would you please take over?
Certainly, sir. Just to bring the citizens up to speed, At the September 18th meeting, the council had given consensus to form an advisory committee to look into short-term rental issues after several short-term rental business and property owners came forward asking about possible future legislation by the council to mitigate some of the issues that we're having in our residential neighborhoods. At the October 2nd City Council meeting, we provided two options for facilitating stakeholder discussion, and the council had decided that we would open up the applications, and then the council would each be able to nominate a person who submitted an application, and that 3 of those could be non-Destin residents. So that said, however, the council would like to proceed for the nominating the short-term rental task force member, and then however the council would like to vote either individually or after all the nominations have been made, that's up to the council.
Do all the nominations and then we'll take a vote. Is it that acceptable with all members of council? I don't see any objections. One other, in that we are limited to only 3 non-residents. Would it be acceptable to ask each nominee to state whether the person they're nominating is a resident or non-resident, and I'll keep track of it and let you know if we do reach 3 or do not reach 3?
Sir, that's listed in the agenda backup information. Every person who has put in an application, we have their name and then listed next to it whether they are a Destin resident or non-Destin resident.
I was trying to save the time of going back and looking at each one as they're nominated, but we can do it either way.
Okay, I can keep track of that for you, sir, if you like.
If you can keep track, we'll
sir.
go down that line. Councilmember Morgan, would you like to lead us off?
Sure. It's just before I make a nomination, by show of hands, who here is nominating a resident, not a property rental manager? Mm-hmm. Okay. My concern is I do want this to be equitable, and I want this to be productive. But I want a 3 to 4 balance. I don't want 5 residents or 5 property managers. So 4 to 3 is okay. And I'd spoke to one person a couple weeks ago about it. And I will nominate Mr. Darrell Shelton, but I would like all the, property rental managers, all the residents to know that when this comes back to us, I'm willing to listen to any considerations. Hopefully y'all achieve a consensus. That's what I got.
Mr. Destin.
Thank you, Mayor. Jason Sprinkle, he is a non-Destin resident.
Mr. Marler.
Bruce Crowell, he is a Destin resident and also a business manager.
Mr. Foreman.
Yes, I'd like to nominate Mr. Rick Scally.
Mr. Foreman, is he a resident or non-resident?
Resident. I'm sorry, and they're written right on here. It's very clear. Aye. Mr. Dixon?
Yes, nominate Mr. Walter Wu.
Councilmember Ramswell.
I nominate Mrs. Patty Brown.
Councilmember Braden.
Thank you, Mayor. I didn't think anybody wanted to be on this committee because I've only received one phone call, and that's it, from one person, asked if I would nominate him, and that would be Guy Tadlock. So I'm going to nominate Guy Tadlock.
Thank you all. I need a motion to, that these nominated members be elected to the board.
So moved.
Okay. I have a motion. I have a second. Any further discussion? I see none. I call for the vote. Unanimous, yes. Ms. Lejeune, you have the floor.
So the next item is, we currently have a contract with Atkins North America. They work with the Florida Department of Transportation. We had contracted with them to assist us with the acquisition and relocation for the parcels that we are trying to purchase so that we can do the crosstown connector. The contract with Atkins were for 3 parcels. We have agreements with 2 of the property owners. We're currently in negotiations with the 3rd property owner. We would like to go forward and start working with the next 3 property owners of that townhouse complex. Once we are able to come to agreement with all 6 property owners, then we will be in a position to be able to demolish that entire townhouse complex, and we'll be one step closer to having all the property that we need for the connector. So at this point in time, we're asking council permission to do an amendment to the existing contract so that we can go forward with the acquisition of the next 3 properties.
I move that the City Council pass Resolution 17-60 that authorizes the city manager to execute a contract amendment with Atkins of North America in the amount of $55,714.17 that provides for property acquisition assistance.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second it, Mayor.
I have a motion. I have a second. Any further discussion? Go ahead, Mr. Dixon.
Looking at these prices for Atkins here on the appraisals and stuff like that, is $2,000, is that a normal cost for an appraisal? Something, huh? We're fixing to give it to them. It's like, I don't even know what to do here, y'all. I mean, it went through pretty quick, and is this what we should be paying for an appraisal?
$26,000 to relocate 3 people?
Well,
I just paid $700 to load up a 2-bedroom condo full of furniture and move it to a storage unit.
It's a very expensive proposition is all I'm asking.
So June, do you have a comment on this?
Yes, sir. I would like to ask Mr. Steven Schmidt, who's been working with Atkins, to see if he can shed some light on this particular issue.
You know, you're right. The cost of a standard residential appraisal for a normal arm's length transaction sale is typically less, but this is a specialty appraisal for an acquisition that may require eminent domain and relocation to meet federal standards. So these appraisals are a little bit higher because the requirements are much more significant.
So the appraisal is a whole lot more difficult to come to a conclusion of what a home is worth?
It's not so much the evaluation of the cost, but also the evaluation of potential relocation benefits meeting federal standards, and it also basically, as I believe it also includes the amount for a review appraisal. So it's kind of two appraisals.
Are you relinquishing the floor?
Yes.
Councilmember Ramsell?
So now I have a question. You mentioned that there might be eminent domain involved in these. I was under the impression that we had already reached agreements with all but a couple of them, a couple to three.
We have.
So then eminent domain has not been involved, at least with all of the others, correct?
It's not yet. It's not yet. But if, at any point in the process, any owners could basically not choose to negotiate or sign a contract, and if we end up in a situation, and the appraisal has to be done so that it can that it can be used in the defense of eminent domain in the event that it doesn't, the negotiation isn't successful. And the appraisal is done before you negotiate, so it has to meet certain standards.
Okay, so now I'm confused, because what you just said is that the appraisal is done before it even gets to eminent domain. So then why would there be additional costs at all if it were to proceed to eminent domain?
One of the things I think that Mr. Schmidt is trying to explain to the council is that this is not a normal negotiation, appraisal, and purchase situation, which is why we brought Atkins in. We have federal regulations and guidelines that surround the entire process. So everything that Atkins does for us is based on the federal guidelines and requirements for acquisition and relocation. So at this point in time, we've been very lucky. Everyone that we've talked with wants to sell. But when we come to a situation where perhaps someone does not want to, or they're trying to negotiate well beyond what the fair market value of their property is, that's when the eminent domain portion would then come into play. So based on the assumption that there may be someone who's not willing to negotiate fairly and sell to us, all of those appraisals have to be done to the federal guidelines and requirements.
So there's a super appraiser out there somewhere.
If that's how you want to define it, yes, sir. It's based on federal guidelines, not your normal real estate transaction.
Could we send Tuffy or Rodney to negotiate with them?
Councilmember Braden?
The appraisal I received on my home about 6 months ago was regulated by federal guidelines as well, and it was $400. And it was close to a $500,000 home. So, I mean, I still ain't buying no $1,800. And why don't we get options? Why is Atkins getting this? Why don't we have 3 bids on anything?
This is the company that we contracted with. It was brought to council. Council approved this contract. Now we're asking to amend the contract because we're ready to try to purchase the next 3 properties. If the council no longer wants to use Atkins, then we'll need to let them finish up the 3 that they're working on, and we'll need to go out and rebid. And this will delay the acquisition and relocation process for the connector. And just as a reminder, we're going to be talking a little bit later in the meeting of the Triumph funding that we've now applied for to pay for the connector. So we don't necessarily want to delay this process.
I understand that, and I understand that Atkins is our continuous contractor. Is that not right? That's what we voted on, is to accept them as our continuous contractor?
As we go through this acquisition and relocation process.
So with all of our continuous contractors that we have, is there not a dollar amount that has to come before the council before we just approve it and
You did, and you have it now in front of you again. There's dollar amounts that you're looking at, and you're either going to approve or not approve.
I've never seen these dollar amounts. Are you saying this was on a prior meeting or agenda that we see these dollar amounts?
In February, sir.
I saw them in February. Thank you. I have no other questions.
Excuse me. Not seeing any further discussion on my panel. Let's see, we didn't have a motion, have we? We did? Got a motion, we got a second. I call for the vote. Six yes, one no, passes. Ms. Lejeune?
Yes, sir. The next item is the Triumph Funding Project Prioritization List. So back in May of this year, during the regular meeting of the council, y'all reviewed a list of proposed projects, and you voted on which ones that you wanted to designate as the priority projects for consideration under the Triumph funding. At that time, we did not know what the criteria or eligibility requirements for the funding was going to be. As of October 4th, the Triumph Gulf Coast, Inc. board put together a draft application for funding submittals, and here we, for the first time, saw the actual criteria that they were going to be reviewing the grant submittals for. At the October 16th meeting, the council gave me a consensus to submit pre-applications for both the Crosstown Connector and for the undergrounding of utilities along Highway 98 for Triumph funding. The Crosstown Connector, with the help of the West Florida Regional Planning Council, that pre-application is complete, and we are submitting to the county for the November 15th deadline. I was also asked to reach out to Walton County to see if they would be willing to partner on an undergrounding project, and they are. So we will be meeting with Walton County principals and staff this week to talk about a potential partnership. We will not be able to have anything ready for the November 15th deadline. However, this is revolving application submittals. So as soon as that project is fleshed out and put into pre-application form, we will then be able to submit it. What is left from the priority projects that the council had designated back in May is the Destin High School, the Gulf Power Easement Linear Park, and the U.S. Highway 98 redesign. Based upon the criteria which is listed in your agenda item, as staff, we don't think that the Gulf Power Linear Park will be meeting the criteria, although it's an important project for the city of Destin, and we're doing everything we can through other grant funding potentials to find money to build this linear park. We don't believe that it's a regional project that will be considered by Gulf Triumph. The U.S. Highway 98 redesign, we have met with FDOT, and we may actually have an opportunity when they do a PD&E feasibility study for Highway 98 from airport to Marler Bridge. I believe it's 2021? Okay. So we'll have an opportunity at that time to present information to FDOT for the redesign that we would like to see as a city. Because it is under FDOT's purview, and this grant money specifically says it cannot supplant any other funding, we don't believe that it would be eligible as well. However, it is up to the council, whatever the council decides that they would like us to put in an application for, but understanding the very small time frame and the fact that even the pre-application is they want a lot of detailed information for the pre-application. I just want council to be able to take that into consideration. We'll do our best to make a November 15th deadline on whatever you may designate tonight, but there is a chance that we may not be able to get all of the information together in time for that deadline. And that's really all the information I had to share, sir, so I'll turn it back to you for council discussion.
Any discussion, or could I have a motion to accept the Crosstown Connector as our first project? Again, this is going over, I guess, a 15 or 18-year period. We'll have lots of other opportunities to apply.
So moved.
I have a motion, but you would just have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'm so sorry, can I interrupt, sir?
Yes.
Okay. I already received a vote from the council to put in the Crosstown Connector, and we've done that, and we are working to do the undergrounding as well. The other three projects is what the council is discussing. There's no motion with this agenda item. It's based on council discussion and what council would like to see going forward.
Councilmember Ramsell.
Thank you, Mayor. Obviously, I remain strongly in favor of the Destin High School project. I think we're all in a bit limbo and concerned with the status of going forward with a vote for the tax. People are kind of hesitant right now, and I know there's going to be a marketing effort to try to bump that up to get the school district the votes it needs to get it passed, but they also have to come up with the money to put it on the ballot. So funds are needed even if we do go that direction, but regardless, funds, significant funds are going to be needed for this project. I know colleges are interested in partnering with us and moving forward with something that involves the environment, which is one of the things we've looked at in terms of STEAM. I know there's also another thing called, and I think you mentioned it when we discussed this issue, is the fact that there's also another one that has reached out to the city manager, another group, and they've talked about another type of vocational aspect that could be done as well. But I remain highly in favor of this. We did have a complete project packet ready to present, and nothing in that has changed. Otherwise, other than the fact that I have been made aware of a piece of property here that has the potential to be purchased and would be feasible for a site for a school that would be standalone. That's being investigated.
Any other comments? Discussion? We don't need a resolution or anything on this item.
No, sir, but if there is one of these projects that council would like staff to go ahead and put together a pre-application, we should probably have a vote that we're going to go ahead and put in another project.
An additional project in addition
Right,
to...
because right now we have the Crosstown Connector. We're going to be working with Walton County on an undergrounding, and if there's an additional project that this council wants to see put forward for Triumph funding, then we need that direction from the council.
I agree with Councilmember Ramsell. The high school is a very important project, but I don't think there's any way we can prepare for it. In addition, I sat through 3 of the last board meetings of Triumph funding, and if you go through that long list of questions they gave, you almost have to be the controlling entity to apply. Doesn't mean we can't strongly support the school board when they make an application for the funding. But they have they even have clawback clauses in it so that the Triumph funding can demand their money back if they don't like the way you utilized it. Not being in control of the project of the high school, we could meet those criteria, but we are certainly can support the school system and what they're doing, but we need to get them, I believe, in my opinion, we're going to have to get the school system to take the leadership and City of Destin be a supporting entity. And I'd kind of recommend to council that we stick with the Crosstown Connector. It's a good project. This is going to be done so quickly. It's got to be done in November. You've got to have all your financials and everything prepared. I can't see where any of the other projects are really feasible to do this quick on such short-term notice.
Mayor, might I add, we don't need the full buy-in of the school board if we decide to go a charter route, which remains a possibility if we need to go that direction. And of course, we could always do a joint magnet, or if things work out and we are able to work with the school district and they're getting the funds and the vote goes through, fantastic. We'll go directly through them. But there are multiple options for us to get this high school that is a necessity. And I believe that package is complete. Is there anything additional that you need for that package?
If I may ask, Councilmember Ramswell, would you be willing to work with us to put together the pre-application, only because based on the criteria, it has to do with partnering with a K through 20 institution, and since you've been working on this, you know, rather than having to figure out who we're working with and who we're partnering with, if you would be willing to help us with this application, I think we could get it done a lot quicker.
Certainly, the entire committee could.
Councilmember Marler.
Thank you, Mayor. I applaud Ms. Ramswell's tenacity and her want for a high school. And I probably understand the reasoning why, but when you start messing with other government entities, when they've already got a plan in place, when the middle school was built, it was built on the premises of there was enough land to add to it and do something similar to what Baker and Holt do in the northern part of the county. The county has a plan, if this tax thing goes through this coming next year, to move to will actually just be better land-wise to use what's there, because of building a high school, the middle school already has a stadium, and of course you know how high school football is around here, and therefore that's already done. I just don't like the idea of overstepping our bounds. We're sitting here discussing whether we're going to buy a power company. Now we're going to be running a school system. That's what the county school system's for. Charter schools, everything's fine. I just think we just need to stick to what we got. Let's see where it goes with the county and their referendum for the money they're trying to raise, for the tax money they're trying to raise, because I think that's where we need to stay out of other people's business. We're already enough and deep enough with Gulf Power. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any further discussion. We've been going an hour and a half. I'd like to call for a quick 10-minute break, and we'll reconvene at about 22 till. Ms. Lejeune, is that okay with you?
I think she's already on a break.
She's on a break. Never mind. We're done. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll start in about 2 minutes. If you'll head toward your seats.
I think that should work. And then my reading of law, because of that, I don't need the inadmissibility to run that. And that letter that I sent to the city. How many minutes?
2. How many do you need?
Right. That's the what?
That's if the dais fills back up in 2 minutes. We will start.
Right, yeah, like Wilson. Had 5 Jeeps parked all in front. Hey.
Yeah, there's still a few in there. All my diets were gone. I didn't see any, so I had to get a real one. Start bringing my ice chest again.
Mr. Foreman, where's your buddy? Where's your buddy?
Like 30 seconds.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'll start in 30 seconds.
Last time they had to come out, they used my cleanout. They concrete, yeah, they concreted that.
If you please, we'll come back to order.
Where, see if you get, okay, all right.
Ms. Lejeune, I'm sorry for interrupting you. You still have the floor.
Yes, sir. All I was going to say is that I am looking for direction from council. If there is the will of the council to go ahead and add this to the project list. I just need to have that direction.
You referring to the school?
Yes, sir.
What's the consensus of council? I know one's very positive for it. Any others? No? No? Yes?
Mayor, I think my only apprehension is that staff time is so, the resources are already so thin. Sending them down on what would likely be a rejection from the Triumph Fund, I just don't know if I could support it right now.
Okay. I'm not seeing but one council member really wanting to do this currently, but I'm certain it's going to be high on our list for next year. Any further direction?
No, sir, that's it. So
Can I ask what it is that y'all would like to see? Because I know we've already done the groundwork. Properties are in place. You know, we've already got everything in motion to be a charter on our own without the school board, yet we also have a plan B and C, which would be a magnet working with the school district, or a C to go solely with them. And I know I'm pushing this, but the time is now. We keep putting this off. We keep putting in, not just us, but the district. They've got a lot of other things going on right now, and I do not see this going forward right now. I don't, you know, there's also the county sales tax, which is moving forward. So there's a lot of other pieces in motion right now, and we can't drop the ball right now when we've already made so much progress, and I know this city is behind it.
And I don't disagree, but this first round that has to be done by November, it just pushing it. If council so desires, I think it could easily become the #1 project for next year.
Can we, I mean, could it be put on this year, and if it's turned down?
If you can finish the proposal, but it's going to require everything from construction costs to you name it. They want a whole package. I don't know how far along this committee is. I'm sorry, I really don't.
Mayor, I hate to put Mr. Destin the elder on the spot, but he is on the school board. Maybe he could enlighten us a little bit and kind of help us if you can. If you can't right now.
I'm sorry, push the button and give us your name. I know everyone in the room knows who you are.
Dewey Destin, 777 Spring Lake Drive, school board member. I can't speak for the board. I can answer questions if you have some.
Well, my question, I do have, the question is that according to the school board, they have a plan if this tax, the cent tax or whatever is coming up on vote next year, to add rooms to the middle school and then move the 5th graders back and add more rooms to the elementary school.
The superintendent does have a proposed plan. It's not been voted on. And until it's voted on, then, you know, it's a proposal of the superintendent.
Because my only concern is that I understand where Ms. Ramswell is coming from, and I applaud her for doing that. But besides stepping on other entities' toes, I think we should wait to see the outlook of what's going to happen next, in the next round, and see what happens. We can go from there.
I would predict you'll know the answer to that real soon.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Appreciate your
Preble, the
advice.
funding you would request would be for a charter school?
The way the project plan is written is that our goal would be to be a fully public school, dependent upon approval from the county school board. If we are unable to obtain that full approval because of funding reasons with the school district, because obviously they have other things they have to fund as well, then we would look at proposing a charter. And perhaps the option then would be that we actually don't even have to propose a charter to them, I don't believe, because we do that on our own. But they can come back to us as a magnet, which would be sort of a cross of both.
To me, and I'm still hoping that the school board's going to vote on this and put it to a tax, and if they don't, then this would be something to consider, but I just don't think that this Destin City Council is the proper body to present to this board. And the reason why I'm saying this is in anticipation of the Triumph Board denying this, because that very crucial fact that we're not going to be the governing body of this school. So I would like to see us go approach the board with the school board, or the school board approach the Triumph Board with our blessing or our coordination or whatever. I just think that this is kind of putting the cart before the horse. So.
When is the deadline, or when is the next year of funding? Like what?
At this point in time, it's a rolling application process. The first deadline was November 15th, so that the county would be able to collect and get it to the Triumph Board. I understand that the Triumph Board would like to be able to make awards and start sending money to shovel-ready projects after the first of the year. However, I have been told that we can submit our applications to the county at any time, and then it will be reviewed and then held until the next round of money. The Triumph Board has not given any specific dates for when additional pots of money are going to come down. We just know that they will be.
Okay, thanks.
I think we're done? Move on? Okay. You feel comfortable with that?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So the next one is a confirmation of the City of Destin Community Development Director, and I'd like to call my HR Director, Ms. Karen Jankowski, up to present this item.
Good evening. Thank you for your time. As the memo states, 18 individuals had applied for the director position, and 4 finalists were picked from this group. Interviews were done during the middle towards the end of August, and just recently we have been able to talk with Ms. Jennifer Bryla. She is currently down in the city of St. Pete Beach, and she has accepted the position. Her resume is attached, so we're really at this point just wanting your blessing about this position. We're very excited to have her. It's taken a little bit of time. They had a hurricane down south and whatnot, but she actually came up the week prior on her own dollar, her own time, to meet with the city manager and a few staff members. It was a very good meeting. A lot of information was shared, and I believe we should be very happy to have her. And she would like to start on November 27th. Any questions? I'll be happy to answer.
Questions, discussion? Do we do a formal vote on the confirmation on this? Do. Could I have a motion? No?
You don't have to do a motion. You don't have to.
Okay, just consensus. Consensus? Any objections? Any discussion? Congratulations, Ms. Lejeune. Looks like you've got another spot filled.
To go and do a vote, though, Mr. Destin said he'd be more comfortable doing the vote.
Okay.
So.
I have a motion from Mr. Destin that we
Yeah,
confirm.
I would go ahead and move it. The only reason I would want to push that is because it's explicitly stated in our city charter that the council confirms department heads, of which this community development director is one, and a confirmation process requires a vote.
Okay. Second? Second. I have a second. Mr. Foreman, if there's no discussion, I call for the vote. Unanimous yes.
Thank you very much. We're very excited to welcome Miss Jennifer Breiler to the city of Destin. The next item on the agenda, sir, E, cancellation of November 20th City Council meeting, policy direction. I think that that's moot, given the fact that the council has given permission to do the RFP, and that needs to come back to council on November 20th. It appears that we're going to have that meeting anyway. I do know that Mr. Farmer, the finance director, would like to bring forward on November 20th the budget amendments that we are required to do by the second meeting in November. However, it should be a short meeting because I have nothing else for that particular agenda, and I myself will be gone for that meeting, and the Assistant City Manager, Mr. Steve Schmidt, will be here in my place.
Excellent. Any announcements?
Yes, sir. I have a few announcements here. November 8th, there will be a presentation by the Florida Department of Environmental Protection regarding the Noriega Point Stabilization Project. It will be 5:30 p.m. at City Hall as part of the Harbor CRA Advisory Committee meeting, and this is open to the entire public. On November 10th, all city facilities will be closed in observance of the Veterans Day holiday. November 17th through 18th, Holiday Craft Show will be held at the Community Center. I went to that last year. It was great. Highway 98 traffic shift, which is part of the FDOT widening project, will be beginning this week, and the east and westbound US 98 travel lanes will be shifted to the south between Airport Road and Henderson Beach State Park. Once the new traffic pattern is in place, the crews will begin sidewalk and roadway construction on the north side of US 98, and when the work is complete, traffic will then be shifted to the north to allow construction of the south side of the highway. And we will keep the citizens apprised of all of the changes in this project, and we ask that you take a look at our Facebook and our web page for additional information. And then the last one I have here in partnership, our partnership with the Destin Fire District for public relations information. They asked us to talk about their autism awareness class. It is free to the public. It will be held Monday, November 13th from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. at the Destin Community Center. Lunch will be provided by Buck's Smokehouse immediately after class, and this is also their first annual autism awareness fundraiser, and it will benefit the autism spectrum on the Emerald Coast Inc., and they will be taking donations for t-shirts and raffle tickets. These can be made prior to the event at the Destin Fire Control District, or it can be made there after the class at the lunch. And that's all I have, sir.
Thank you. We do not have any ordinances for first reading. We'll move to item 6, public hearing on ordinance 1722 PC, which amends the comprehensive plan. Mr. Burns, would you read by title?
Ordinance 17-22-PC, an ordinance to the City of Destin, Florida, amending its comprehensive plan 2020, providing for authority, providing for findings of fact, providing for title, providing for jurisdiction, providing for intent, amending Chapter 1, future land use element, amending Chapter 2, transportation element, amending Chapter 12, administration, and amending Chapter 13, glossary, providing for transmittal to the Florida Department of Economic Opportunity, providing for incorporation into the comprehensive plan, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date. And this is a public hearing on the first reading of this ordinance.
Ms. Lejeune, further explanation?
Yes, sir. I'd like to invite Mr. Austin Mount from the West Florida Regional Planning Council to come forward and give the presentation to council.
Good evening, Mayor, council members.
Please repeat your name and title again, please, sir.
Austin Mount, Executive Director for the West Florida Regional Planning Council. Always a pleasure to be here with you guys. Tonight I'm going to present to you a report that we have on the City Council Comprehensive Plan amendments. I know you were expecting Caitlin to present this tonight. She has been your project leader for the duration of this contract. She has a scheduling conflict and was unable to be here tonight, so you get me as a backup. The purpose of this project is to review the particular topics of density and intensity, height, and the multimodal transportation district. A community comparisons report was generated and presented at 2 City Council special workshops where input was gathered to help inform the amendments. Draft amendments were already presented in July and August for council review. Let's get this over. Consensus from City Council received at the special workshops indicated it's difficult to understand impact of total floor area ratio as a way to calculate density and intensity. City Council supports the multimodal transportation district, but there is a desire to remove ability to mitigate multimodal regulations. There was also directive to refine the definition of building height to make it easier to interpret. Finally, the Planning Council received directive that the City Council did not want to use total floor area ratio as asked for development standards comparable to a Tier 1. The Planning Council has provided conceptual renderings of mixed-use developments in comparison coastal communities that are similar in size, experience influx of tourists, and also experience varying degrees of redevelopment. All 3 communities use units per acre to calculate density and floor area ratio to calculate non-residential. Cocoa Beach has a base height of 45 feet. The bulk of the building is large because they do not prohibit using the total parcel average twice, parcel acreage twice for calculating density and intensity. Key West does not allow the utilization of the parcel's total acreage twice for calculating density and intensity. Therefore, the building is not as bulky as Cocoa Beach and Fort Walton Beach. The maximum height is 52 feet and the floor area ratio of 1. This Fort Walton Beach mixed-use development is 70 feet high and a floor area ratio of 2. You'll notice the bulkier size due to the ability to double dip in density and intensity calculations. Here is a mixed-use development in the North Harbor Mixed-Use District. The comprehensive plan used to have a Tier 2 development standards. The plan does not contain Tier 2 and any longer since the last amendments. The building height is 100 feet and the total floor area ratio is 1.75. Here is a conceptual Tier 3 mixed-use development in North Harbor Mixed-Use District. There is currently no Tier 3 development standards in the comprehensive plan. The height is 160 feet and the total floor area ratio of 2.5. Here is a conceptual rendering of currently approved regulations for mixed-use development in the North Harbor Mixed-Use District. Height is 110 feet and the total floor area ratio is 3.0. Since the entire building is calculated for floor area ratio, residential density is not calculated. Here is a conceptual rendering of a mixed-use development in North Harbor Mixed-Use Base based on proposed regulations that came out of the City Council workshops. The height is 60 feet, 16.9 units per acre, and the floor area ratio of 0.8. In this scenario, the developer has the choice of how much acreage to devote to non-residential. The units per acre is established based on the remaining acreage. Here is an overall comparison of development standards for all the conceptual renderings. The renderings were all completed on a 2.15 acre site. The conceptual renderings do not take into consideration all site constraints like open space and parking. Most notable is the comparison of residential units developed. The proposed units are based on 1,000 square feet. Here are references to policies that have been revised. Total floor area ratio has been removed. Amendments show an emphasis to protect residential areas, and there has been removal of old intensity bonuses. There is a one incentive to build structures with two uses. The two uses would have to be residential, office professional, and/or any type of commercial. Height has been revised to measure up to the cornice lines to top of roof lines based on input received at the workshop. The definition encourages people to utilize habitable space to the maximum potential and reduces the opportunity to convert uninhabitable space illegally on the back end. You can still have a varied roof line through non-habitable architectural embellishments above the roof line. Also, the use of varied roof lines through the utilization of parapets and/or sloped roofs is currently required in Article 7 of the Land Use Development Code, thus preventing flat roofs. Maximum height limits have also been amended in each future land use district as directed by City Council in the special workshops. Here is an example of a single-family home with the height measured to the top of the roof line plus addition of the architectural embellishments above. The grandfather clause has been expounded upon and states that amendments will not impact development which lawfully existed prior to effective date of the comp plan or development that was authorized pursuant to a development order unexpired as of the effective date of the comp plan. The Multimodal Transportation District was created in 2005 as a way to reduce congestion through a mix of land uses, transportation, and building design. All developments located within the Multimodal Transportation District are required to contribute to the multimodal network to minimize vehicle trips and provide options for travel. Proposed projects within the Multimodal Transportation District are evaluated for concurrency through a flexible point system called Concurrency Evaluation Certification, or CEC. Generally, the points values are assigned to multimodal site design measures such as sidewalks, building orientation, and bicycle parking. If the minimum number of points is not met through on-site design elements, the mitigation options are available. The CEC form and the availability to mitigate has been proposed to be removed in Chapter 12, Administration. The Land Use Development Code still contains many of the development standards outlined in the CEC form. That concludes an overview of the proposed amendments. There was general support for the amendments at the workshops. However, as the amendments have become public, we have received quite a few calls in opposition of this from developers. We also have received phone calls in support from developers. So quite a few mixed messages, but again, we do appreciate you all utilizing us to assist with this comp plan. It is not our position to recommend, provide any type of position on how you should proceed. We just simply compiled the information and are providing that to you for your choice of adoption or however you wish to proceed.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the presentation. Ms. Lejeune?
Yes, sir. I just wanted to let you know that at this point, the contract with the West Florida Regional Planning Council is concluded. They have provided the deliverables that were outlined in their contract. Of course, I'm sure that Mr. Mount and Kimberly Kopp can answer any questions. Council has the red line version of the changes before them. Any additional revisions at this point, I believe that we can make those as staff. But again, I want to thank Mr. Mount and Caitlin and her team. They were an absolute pleasure to work with, truly professional and knowledgeable. And just thank you so much for sticking with us.
Sorry I had to read that from all the papers here as a presentation. No due, but I did it anyways. Caitlin wanted me to, so I did.
Thank you. I hope you'll continue to work for us through the evening. We may have more questions. With the council's blessings, I would like to open the public discussion first. and then we'll go to council discussion. No objections. Any member of the public that would like to speak to this matter is welcome to do so. Either stand or wave your hand. You'll be next.
Thank you, Mayor. Council, Shane Moody, President and CEO of the Destin Chamber. I came before you all 2 months ago, 3 months ago when this first came up, and we gave you all a position paper, so you've seen that, you've read it, and I made comments on it that night, so I'm not going to go over that again. But some things that we would like to point out that we have some concern about. In the grandfather clause, it doesn't sound like buildings that are in existence now are protected if they get more than 51% damaged in a storm or some other disaster, which means that some of the better buildings we have in the community, if they get damaged, you can only go back to about 3 stories or 4 stories on them rather than the 6 to 8 or 10 that we may have now, which completely removes the value of those properties because they're not going to be able to be rebuilt at that. We're concerned about that. Measuring from the water line instead of the crown of the road in the Harbor District is also a concern. There are several really good restaurants, very popular restaurants there, that if they get damaged, they would not be able to be built back because they're already well above the height limit that exists there. I can't read my own writing. There's also some concern about mixed use in some areas that we could use residential development, also parking. One of the best ways to build affordable housing, workforce housing, is to build a 3-story garage and then put townhomes on top of it or apartments on top of it. We would not be able to get that done in some areas because you would be above the limits. As well, there are some other areas where we could do mixed-use redevelopment. A good example would be using apartments that are being built on commons right now that are on county property under county jurisdiction. We wouldn't be able to do anything like that in the city because they would go above the height limits there. So those are some of the concerns that we have in addition to the things that we stated a couple of months ago, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Peter Boss, 3889 Indian Trail. First concern is going back all the way back to the Vision 2000 and the Sasaki plan and every plan that went on for 20 years now. One of the big challenges was to create a measurement of height that encouraged a varied roof line and a roof line that was visible from the ground. Remember, as a building goes up, your angle, your line of sight, so getting a greater pitch was important, but that pitch is also expensive. So there was some incentives where at least you could use, as long as it was tied to the top floor unit, where you could have a loft inside to recover some of the cost. This also allows you to hide air conditioning units, et cetera, et cetera. As I read this now, you limited that to 6 feet on residential and 10 feet on commercial. Well, 10 feet parapet wall won't even hide an air conditioning unit on a pedestal that's on top of a commercial building. And as we saw in those pictures, we are going to end up with a whole lot of flat roof buildings because if we cut the height down, you're going to use, any developer, myself included, is going to be working to maximize the space. So the whole idea of having that extra, the ornamentation that comes with a varied roof, and I hate to say it, but the discussion was a long time ago, we didn't want to look like Holiday Isle. We didn't want that sea of flat roofs. Unfortunately, this ordinance lends us, there's no incentive to encourage roof lines other than flat. In fact, they will be all flat. And 2, as we notice, the apartments that are being built are typically built to a 4-story walk-up condition today. That's the only way the economics work. And we basically have completely ruled them out. So if we look at the North Shore of Destin and we look at those areas, we have banned anyone from building those kind of economical apartments. So that's your typical model now nationwide. So it kind of takes us out of the field of trying to redevelop that area, in my opinion. And then finally, I obviously have given consideration to the awesome economic adverse impact that these draconian reductions in height and intensity and density and the have on those few pieces of property that are available along the harbor to be developed. And you also, as you get rid of what's called double dipping, which has kind of a negative connotation, remember that the North Harbor District is meant to be a mixed district. And commercially, frankly, having experienced now for 10 years running commercial operations, they don't make enough money to actually pay for their construction costs yet. We don't have the revenue streams that do that. We don't have the rent base that does it. So what happens is it all goes to a residential, but you don't get the mixed use that we've all been fighting for when you make one replace the other. I would urge you, in the real summary, please don't take the city, I thought, came up with a very clever plan. I don't know who did it. It was done 10, 15 years ago, but the measurement of height and the incentive in that program that's in our current land development code is really the best that I've seen, and it really is a good program, and hopefully to get rid of as many flat roofs as we can. 2, please make sure that you don't set height limits which feel good, but you're effectively wiping out a whole market segment as we try to redevelop and create workforce housing, affordable housing, multifamily, and those kind of things on our north side of 98. And then 3, you have had this is a huge adverse impact on a lot of properties that people have owned for years and years and years. And whether they amalgamate those properties or they develop them separately, when you take the height down, you basically cut the density, and then eliminating what you call double dipping, you've effectively cut the property value by 60% or more. So there's not many people who do that. I mean, one more thing real quickly while I've got a few minutes. We've learned the hard way. If you're on a waterfront site and you can't see the water, the property value had declined. We had units at Emerald Grand that faced north, which is still nice. It faced Crab Island. We could not sell them for 50% as much as ones that could see the east pass of the harbor. Not 50%. And when the recession hit, we had not sold a single unit facing Crab Island. So as you put these buildings and you lower the height, you're going to end up with these rectangular boxes. We went through this with the Sasaki plan and that. You're going to end up with units facing east and west, which means they're going to face their neighbors, or you're facing Highway 98, and that'll never sell. So if you really want to have any development or do anything, and not basically completely devalue this property, you have to be able to go up so at least the people can have the view, and you create more visual and green space between the buildings with step back so you can see the harbor instead of just flattening everything out. Please reconsider those points. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Not seeing it.
Thank you. My name is Bruce Ming. I live at 3 Cross Court here in Destin, and my wife and I own property in the Harbor District, as well as my family has had property since the 50s affected by this proposed change. I just want to stand in front of you and tell you that I am strictly against it. I don't see what's wrong with what we have now, and I would urge you to consider not changing it. If you change to these proposed height restrictions and density restrictions, it's going to cut the value of my commercial property in half, as well as affect the property that my family owns on Calhoun Avenue. I don't feel like this would be in the best interest of any of the property owners in the affected area, because as Mr. Boss said earlier, it's going to cut the values down. If you cannot build out your property like you'd planned to, and we have planned to for years and years and years, now all of a sudden we're restricted, who's going to buy it? Or how are we going to make it profitable? I just strongly urge you to reconsider and leave everything like it is. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Mike Schutz. I own some property at 127 Calhoun Avenue, which is in CMU District, as well as 109 and 115 Cybert Avenue, which is in the CMUV District. And I think I'm opposed to this ordinance. I think it's a very aggressive take from the property rights of the owners down there. And I just want to communicate to you that I am opposed to it. I would encourage you, and I support the amendment or the comp plan that was approved in 2016, which doesn't seem that far ago or that long ago. by the council before you guys. So I'm opposed to this ordinance. It's just too much of a take, and I think what we have in place now is fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir. Please just remind you, if you simply agree with the person that just spoke ahead of you, please just say so without repeating it all again. It'll save us a little time this evening. Thank you. Go ahead.
Yes, my name is Jim Ball. I live in Destin, Florida, and I do agree with Mike Schutz on the positions he took. But I'm also here representing Johnny Himes and Ron and Pamela Whitehead, who are property owners in the CMU, and they wish to express their statements that they do not want the code as is changed. So they are hoping that you guys will vote no to this proposal and we keep it the way it is. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
I'm Stephen Tatum, Matthews & Jones law firm. I wear a lot of different hats there. I'm not actually an attorney. Here today maybe as a planner, wearing my planner hat. I was a planner at the City of Marianna for 8 years prior to going to law school. I'm going to come at this at a different angle than everyone else. Part of the problem I see with this ordinance is that you're putting a height limit in your comp plan. Now, I've heard Mr. Burns describe the comp plan to you guys before as your constitution. It's not your statutes, it's not the minor details, it's kind of a broad overview of things. But you're putting a height limit in the comp plan, and part of what that makes happen is it doesn't allow someone who has a hardship on their property to ask for a variance. They can't come in and say, you know, we found, I don't know, architectural ruins or something on our property, just pulling that out of the air. But, and so I can't use all my property for development, so I need to go higher to get my density in. If that were to be the case, they could not just come in and say, can I get a variance and go before the zoning board of adjustments and get it approved? And no, they would have to actually ask for a comp plan amendment, which you guys know takes a considerable amount of time. So I think it's a bad idea to have this height limit requirement for every single district in the city within your comp plan. I think it's a better idea to just eliminate that, move it into your LDCs. I mean, you're doing an LDC rewrite right now anyway. And then, you know, if we need to adjust it or talk about it, it's a whole lot easier. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm seeing one more. Is there anyone else after this lady speaks? Mr. Destin? Okay.
Mr. Mayor and all the councilors, I'm Virginia Horn.
Push your button so the red light comes on the base there.
Not used to doing this.
There you go. Now give us your name again, please.
I'm Virginia Horn. My husband and I are probably the only first property owners on the Calhoun area where we're from. So we're trying to preserve our property there. So I just ask you, please, please, please vote against this situation. I'm just learning a little bit about it because I've been in Alabama some, taking care of things. So this is just unbelievable what's going on. So just ask you to please vote no.
Mayor, can I ask her to clarify what she means? Ms.
Please,
Horn?
would you please come back?
I have a question for you, ma'am.
Certainly.
I'm just curious what it is that you're opposed to. Do you want more height from buildings that are coming in, or what is it that you're particularly opposed to?
I just want you to vote no to all the presentations that the previous gentlemen have made. Have you not been listening to them?
Oh, no, I have. I was just curious whether, because if
we're
you're
happy like we are, in other words.
You're happy like you are.
We want to keep it like it is.
I got it.
And
Thank you, ma'am.
preserve our property.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Mr. Destin.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. Dewey Destin, 77 Spring Lake Drive. At present, my family has ownership interests in approximately 320 feet of waterfront property in this area. So we've got as big a stake in this as anybody in this room. But I've got a bigger stake that means more to me than that. And that stake is the future of West Destin. Our traffic is gridlocked all through the summer. We don't have any parking. Our business is fleeing to South Walton. And if we don't try to get what we're doing in the future controlled, these problems will continue. I looked through the proposed densities and intensities and heights in the ordinance tonight, and I see that down in the Calhoun mixed use, we allow 12 units residential per acre. I think the biggest parcel down there is probably around 5 acres, so you could put in 60 residential units on that 5-acre plot down on Calhoun. I think the height is 50 feet. You could put a Hampton Inn down there, even under these regulations. And these are a restriction from what was there. Over on the harbor side, it's, I think, 17.9 units per acre. So it's not hard to do the math. If we went forward even with this plan that is a reduction from what was there before, we could put hundreds and hundreds of more residential units into West Destin, where we can't even drive through town from 3 to 8 o'clock at night. We can't find a place to park. I think everyone should have the right to use their property, and I would urge you to work with these folks that have expressed some misgivings about where we're going, but we can't keep going to more and more and more. We're going to kill this part of Destin. People will stop coming if they can't drive through, if they can't find a place to park. That's what's happening now. I spoke to my compatriots in the restaurant business over the last week. One of them told me his average ticket price on his customers, and he's located as close to the bridge as you can get, has gone down $5 a meal this year. If we continue to go in that direction with unbridled growth, without addressing the parking, without addressing the traffic, then we're going to kill West Destin. And that's what I am urging you not to do. I would say that the height is in the South Harbor District and perhaps the North Harbor District has been pretty dramatically reduced here in this, and I would suggest that we need to compromise on the heights. That's probably too low, but you know, I would love to see you work forward to try to get some kind of comprehensive plan in place to where we can address all the issues we have on this side of town. You know, this is first reading. We can work some more between now and second reading with the group that has spoken tonight to see if we can't find some path forward to not destroy the future of West Destin, but to allow them to use their property. Thank you.
Thank you.
Excuse me, Mayor, just one
Yes.
point of clarification. If approved on first reading tonight, it will go to state for review before it comes back to second reading for the council.
Yes.
Again, thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Curtis Gwynn. I live at 4 Wiki Wachee Circle. I'm here for a couple of reasons. First of all, I'm here on behalf of Mr. Jerry Wright and Mr. Ralph Mizell. They both live outside of the area and couldn't be here tonight to represent themselves in person. So they asked me if I would speak on their behalf. They own over 5 acres of land in the CMUV, which is what Mr. Destin was talking about. They absolutely oppose Ordinance 17-22 PC, which is on for first reading tonight. They would like to go on the record for no change to the current zoning, which was just passed in April of last year. This is not right and should not be passed. Now, I'd like to speak as a resident of Destin. I applaud each one of you for being council members and giving of your time to serve the people of Destin. And that's what you're here for, is to serve the people of Destin and to hopefully vote for their will and not your own personal will. I'm close personal friends with a lot of the property owners in the South Harbor mixed use, in the North Harbor mixed use, in the CMU and the CMUV. I'm not a paid representative of anybody. I'm not speaking on anybody's behalf because they're paying me to do so. I'm here because I'm concerned about this proposed ordinance. As you've heard tonight, and I'm not sure whether you understand, but all of the owners, all of the property owners in the CMU zoning district are opposed to this ordinance. 100% of them. 80% of the owners in the CMUV are opposed to this ordinance. And the reason that number is not higher is because we didn't talk to the Destin water users who owns parcels in there. We didn't talk to Okaloosa Gas. The Presbyterian Church, who owns property in there, is not represented here. And there are two multifamily projects that are built out that are in this CMUV zoning district. So, 80% of the owners are opposed to this is a pretty high number. This ordinance should not be about a few landowners wanting to impose restrictions on the majority of the owners in this district. If they want to restrict the height and density on their properties, that's great. Let them do it. That's going to keep, some of the high rises, if they were ever built, going up on the harbor. They should be able to do with their individual property rights what they want to do with their property. The other property owners should be able to do with their property, with their personal property rights, what they want to do. So, please do the right thing and vote no on this ordinance. It's just not right. I've talked to, 5 or 6 or 7 people that own property in the North Harbor and the South Harbor districts that knew nothing about this, knew nothing about all this stuff was going on. I actually went into a seafood market to buy some seafood yesterday, and it dawned on me that I was standing in the North Harbor mixed use. I said, are y'all aware of what's going on? No, what are you talking about? So, another thing that I would ask the city to do, kind of like what Ms. Ramsey was saying about the Gulf Power stuff, about getting information out to people so people will know what's going on. I talked to one business owner, I got a few seconds left here. I talked to one business owner and I said, well, you heard what's going on? Oh yeah, the city notified me that they're going to widen the sidewalk in front of my property, so it didn't bother me and I didn't pay any attention to it. I said, so you were not notified what's going on with this ordinance? Oh no. Talked to another owner and they said, oh yeah, we got a notice in the mail about a proposed piece of property was going to be developed on Mountain Drive, but I've heard nothing about this. So it's just not right the way this has been going. The other thing I have a concern about, and I wanted to ask a question. The last time this was supposed to come up, the last council meeting, it got tabled to this one. The last council meeting...
Sorry, wrap it up. Your time's up.
I'm wrapping it up. The last council meeting, some of the zoning in the thing that the ordinance the LPA approved has now been changed to the one that y'all have tonight. I want to know how that happened and why that happened. Some of the densities went from, Mayor, some of the densities went from 9.9 up to 12, and I don't understand how that happened between the last city council meeting and this one without the public knowing about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the audience that'd like to speak? We're going to reserve the rest of the time for the council.
I'm Retha Alexander. I live here in Destin, and I think along with a very small handful of people here in this room, I had the privilege of being born here and spending the majority of my youth here. So I remember what it was before everything grew out of control. And I think it's out of control because the traffic in the summertime is horrendous. I mean, we go from home to the store, back home. That's it. I don't want to face this traffic if I don't have to. How much more can this little peninsula take? This was a small fishing village 50 years ago. You know, for economic reasons, we had to grow some. I get that. But when we start having, I kind of like, I love the way Holiday Isle looks. I'm sorry, with the uniformity of the buildings, I love the way that looks. I think there needs to be a height restriction. Last year, before this comp plan was passed, a citizen got up here and requested that it not be passed until the new council was seated so that it could have a closer look at taken at it, because we knew that there were concerns, but it was passed anyway. And now here we are, you know, with questions on it. There need to be limits. You know, I understand growth, but Destin can't take much more growth. And the limits on height, the limits on density, whatever, I don't care. I don't want to see it out of control like it is anymore. You know, I want to be able to drive through Destin and not have to worry about bumper-to-bumper traffic for 2 miles, you know. And this is my home. You know, I moved back here because this is my home. It's not like it was when I was a kid, but that's okay. It is what it is. We'll deal with it. But don't let it get any worse.
Thank you. One last shot. Wave, stand up, holler. Okay.
Sorry.
This will be our last speaker.
Thank you for hearing me. I'm Carrie Harbaugh, and I live here in Destin. We've waited 20 years for there to be some type of, I hear everybody talking, and I'm probably friends with a lot of them, but it's not about money, and I get property rights, but when the quality of thousands of us is decreased because we're overdeveloping, we need to reevaluate. I'm not trying to put anybody in a bad position, but I think enough is enough. And my family owns several homes here too. I'm invested. I might not own waterfront, but I'm invested. I work here, I live here, I do charities, I do everything anybody asks. We have to put an end. We have to have a limit because we're not self-policing. Everybody that spoke here, God love them all, but they're here for the dollar, not the quality. I want some quality here. Please, I beg you, get a backbone, put a limit on it, let's stand by our guns. It hurts my heart to come up here and talk against people I care about, but come on, don't put me in a position to do it. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll reserve the rest of the time for the council. Ms. Kopp, is there anything that was said that you might want to correct that?
No, not unless you have questions.
Okay.
Mayor, just because it is a public hearing, it probably would be advisable just to ask if anyone else does want to comment on it, just because of the importance of this issue. So,
For the fourth time, huh?
Yeah.
My attorney says, one more shot. Anybody? Thank you. Councilmember Braden.
Thank you, Mayor. You know, the majority of the changes that we've made, I can support. The only one that I can't support, and I didn't support it in the workshop, was the height restriction on the North Harbor in the town center, going from 100 feet or 110 feet down to 50 feet. I think that's asking way too much. The CMUV, the height is the same. There's no change in that I'm seeing. Changing from 12 units per acre from 16 is the only change that I'm aware of. But the one thing that I can't support is the going from 110 feet to 50 feet. I think that's just asking way too much. I think the Canaan group put us way too high. This is putting us way too low. I think we need to get back to a happy medium. The CG was cut from 130 feet down to 50 feet. I mean, that's just asking way too much, in my opinion, and from what I've heard from majority of the citizens of Destin. No, they don't want come off the Destin Bridge and see 15-story condos from the Destin Bridge all the way to Holiday Isle, you know, on both sides of the highway. I mean, we just can't support it. But yeah, if we can make those changes, if we could change the, you know, increase the height on the North Harbor, the town center, you know, I could be in favor of it. The rest of the changes, I can support. That's all I have right now, Mayor. Thanks.
Councilmember Foreman.
Thank you, Mayor. Almost all of the input I've had to me personally and obviously tonight have been negative for a lot of the same reasons. And what they're saying I'm listening to is the fact that we've just gone across the board and we've decreased the height limits, I guess by pulling figures out of the air. We don't know why we're going from this story to this story. We don't have any formula for it, but I did a lot of work on it, and the Russians would be proud of this in a monolithic way, because that's what the whole city is going to look like. Single-family dwellings going to be at 35 feet or less across the city, and there are many of these things in here that I've looked at, and I can't account for the logic as to how we came to those height limits. I understand what people are saying, that, you know, by decreasing height limits, we're going to decrease the number of cars on the highway. Does that make sense? Are we going to do some of those things just for the exercise of doing it? The other part of it is the gentleman over there made a good point, is that this by putting it in the comp plan instead of the land development code, what you've done, you've restricted your ability at a later date to make some modifications to it that would be easier and probably more tailored. So, you know, that would be one thing I would change. I think the fact that most of the folks here are long-termers, they're here for the long haul. I don't think it's unreasonable to listen to them and to see that what they want to modify here is accommodated. So for that reason, I'm not going to vote for this ordinance.
Councilmember Destin.
Thank you, Mayor. You know, this is going to be the hardest thing I end up doing probably during my term. It is, my father came up here. It's not easy to do this. You know, we've got a lot of land that is in these affected areas. It is not easy to come up here and do things that are against your own financial self-interest, but in the broader spectrum of things, we cannot support unbridled development. And where it stands right now, we're one more development from completely gridlocking the city. And I'm talking about on the north side of Highway 98, across the street from the Emerald Grand, where the tattoo parlor is. Yeah, everybody remember when they said, oh, 13 stories, is Destin out of their mind? Yeah, we are, because we won't do anything to say that needs to be reduced. And these big alligator tears about, oh, my investment. We have passed a point where if you keep on approving these monstrosity big box buildings without any parking congruency, without traffic congruency, we're just doing it because some individuals want to make their full buck, and I can't stand for it. I got to live here another 50 years. Most people in this room are going to be gone. And what are we going to be left with? I'm in it for the long term. So I do agree that there could be some tweaks, some changes. I echo the sentiments of Mr. Braden. We need to find a compromise. I think in the Southern Harbor District, South Harbor District right now, I think is around 4 stories. We need to bump that up to 6. I think 6 is an accommodation at 75 feet. That's something we need to do. I don't mind doing that for the North Harbor District either. But at the end of the day, we have to entertain real restrictions. We really do. We are too far gone. It's irresponsible at this point. It's blatantly irresponsible. And I understand there's going to be folks who are going to come up here and say, listen, don't do this because I'm in the real estate business. Oh, don't do this because I need to make my commissions and I need as many units per acre because I got to make a living making a commission. This is not Destin of 1985, 1995, where we've got lots of room and anybody can make a whole bunch of money. We've gotten past that point. So my recommendation is that we go ahead with this and send it to first reading at the next meeting with some alterations. My suggestion is to incorporate Rodney Braden's suggestions for the North Harbor District and include a compromise for the folks on the South Harbor District. I understand dropping them from 110 to 50 is a lot. My suggestion is 6 stories, 75 feet. And I also understand that we've put in a grandfathering clause. I appreciate that. I like it, with the exception of subsection A. We will not be accomplishing what we need to do, which is if we grandfather in all lawfully existing prior to the effective date of the comprehensive plan, all densities, heights, and intensities, how does that fix anything? It really doesn't, because we're still going to get the 13-story monstrosity at the base of the bridge that will serve as another bookend to the Emerald Grand, and that's it. That's the end of West Destin. I can't support that. So I would remove subsection A, but leave the rest of the grandfathering clause in there. If you have an active DO, if you've got a DO and it's not expired, you got your property rights vested, but I wouldn't expand it beyond that. I understand what we're trying to accomplish from a Burt Harris claim. I understand that we're trying to dodge some litigation, but that goes too far, in my opinion.
Just a question for you. I think the portion you're referring to, that refers to existing buildings, not existing comp plan rights. It's talking about if the building exists. So if there's not a lawfully existing building, that doesn't apply. I just wanted to... Sure, yes.
Put some clarifying language in there. Otherwise, I'm comfortable to move forward. I know we would need to incorporate the changes to the South Harbor and the North Harbor with an increase to 75 feet and 6 stories, but otherwise, I'm comfortable with moving ahead.
You want to make that in the form of a motion?
Yeah, I move that we incorporate changes to this proposed ordinance to change the South Harbor District's heights to 6 stories, 75 feet for the North Harbor District, South Harbor District, and I'm sorry, NHMU, SHMU, and that the language for subsection A of policy 1-2.1.5 be clarified, that it could not be construed to any properties having vested rights before an active DO has been issued.
Question, Mayor. Councilmember Braden had included the town center. Do you wish to include that in your motion as well, sir?
That's fine.
Ms. Scott, have you got a clear understanding of what that motion is? And council members can. I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion. I have a second. Further discussion? Ms. Ramsell, you're next.
Thanks. I'm not going to repeat what my fellow councilmen have said because I do agree with them. I do have 2 points, or 1 point and 1 question. Since Ms. Kopp is writing, I'll go ahead to my first point. I'd just like to note that in South Walton, 30A has been restricted to 4 stories and a lot do not have views. They've done pretty darn well. So that doesn't really bother me in terms of going a little bit lower. I do agree with the need for some architecture features, and I think we've done a pretty good job of writing that in. I know that we've got, I believe it was 70 feet, up to 70 feet, not 70 feet, 7, what is that, for the attic space to create a...
6 feet.
6 feet. And it's what for businesses? 10. My other question, this is a question, I attended the LPA meeting, and so I have a copy of what was presented to them, And Mr. Gwynn is correct. I do note that the maximum density as presented to the LPA was 9.9 in CMU and CMUV, but tonight in our packet, it is 12. Why was that change made?
I wish Caitlin was here to answer that, because she's probably the only one that can give you a for sure answer, but I believe the reason she changed it is that there was a question at the LPA meeting as to why there were different stories for the same height. For example, you could have a 5-story limit and then 75-foot height, and then a 6-story limit with a 75-foot height. So she was correcting those kind of mistakes or things that she didn't think about before the LPA meeting, because it was questioned.
Does that clarify for you, Mr. Gwynn? Sorry, you're not on the record. So would y'all allow him to just comment?
The number of units per acre has nothing to do with what I understand she was just talking about. It was 9.9. You know, the height has nothing to do with the number of units you can put on. You know, it's a ratio of how high you can go and how many units you can put on. It based on what size units you put on there. And it was originally at 9.9. It's right now it's at 16. And, you know, and all this stuff about, you know, you still have to get traffic concurrency. You still have to get all the things that you have to get to develop. And nobody in their right mind right now is going to go out there and build a 10-story building on the north side of the harbor because you won't be able to sell the units. But, you know, so...
What happens when that changes?
I'm sorry?
What happens when that changes?
What happens when that changes? Then the person that has owned that property for 30 years in their family would be able to recognize the gain that they need to recognize on their property, Parker. I mean, it's just, you know, it's just economics. I mean,
it's not just economics. It's quality of life, Mr. Gwynn.
It's quality of life.
It's quality of
Correct.
life.
I lived here all your life. I mean, I've been part of the problem. I've developed here. I've helped create some of the traffic. Correct. But everything I've ever done has been quality. It's been done correctly. And now, instead of it taking me 10 minutes to get from point A to point B in Destin, it takes me 20 minutes. It's still not like being in Atlanta or one of these big cities. I mean, so the traffic is not, you know, it's a problem, but I get around fine, you know. So, but the issue that she's talking about, I don't think it's correct.
Well, we can have her look into that so that when we come back with this, we have an answer, because I'd like to know how it got changed and why. And that way we can let y'all know.
And, you know, and believe me, I've raised my family. I love Destin. And, you know, I don't want to see rampant development, Parker. I mean, but right now, if you're going to do something, you have to go through, you know, you have to get traffic concurrency. If there's not traffic concurrency there, you can't build it. You're not going to be able to get a permit. So, you know, it's based on, you know, I've done development all my life. It's based on that. So.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah,
I really appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the only question/comments that I had. Thank you.
Councilmember Marler.
Thank you, Mayor. Number one, first thing, do we have any active DO whatsoever or anything in the pipeline for the property at the foot of the bridge on the north side? I mean, have they come in? And I know there was some newspaper articles, but we don't have anything in the pipeline for that particular piece of property.
We have had something in the pipeline, but my understanding is that they did not meet the most recent submittal deadline.
Okay. All right. Secondly, Ms. Kopp, could you, I've actually got it up here, but could you just give me a Cliff's Note, the audience a Cliff Notes version of the Harris Act, basically on what would happen if we pass this and what we could face under the Harris Act?
Are you asking did I, or do you want me to? No, I did not.
Can you give them a Cliff Notes version real fast of what could possibly happen if we vote on this tonight with the Harris Act? If it votes yes.
Well, there is a Burt Harris Act, and if it is determined that Vested rights are inordinately burdened. The city could have to defend any lawsuit that was brought against it. Not saying whether that has merit or not tonight, but if you're asking what the potential is, that's it.
Okay, and then the only other comment I have is that basically we have a situation where you've got a lot of property owners who are saying that they're not happy. It's not that they're not happy, it's just that the way we're trying to do this, maybe it does need to go into the land development code and not the comp plan. And I agree with that. I think that's where it needs to be, not the comp plan. But at the same time, we have the majority of the citizens in this room are property owners in there, and they're saying that it's not fair to them. So I think passing it tonight without us going back and further trying to figure out what Parker and the rest of them are trying to do is we just need, and the height restriction, I still can't agree with that. We made an across the board, across the city, a height restriction. That doesn't mean that somebody's going to build it 10 stories tall. It just means they have that right, as a private property owner to do that. And with Florida being a property rights state, you have those inalienable rights. So I just don't believe that what we're trying to pass here tonight is the right thing to do. Thank you.
Councilmember Braden.
I'm done, Mayor.
Okay. Councilmember Morgan.
Thank you, Mayor. You know, throughout the whole workshop process, I was waiting for this thing to get pulled back to the middle, and it never did. And I could tell you that generally based on voting history, probably Mr. Foreman and Mr. Marler were going to not support this. But this is the strongest opposition to date that I've heard from either one of you, which was expected, but it's also, it's a waste of money and it's a waste of, time to go through this workshop process, come out with the results, and I haven't heard opposition really from anyone until now. And I'm not saying I agree with the 50-foot. I think that it's very drastic. It is a drastic reduction. It is what it is. But I do agree with Mr. Destin that if you book in the entrance to West Destin, it's, it's not good. High density, this incredible high density that we have experienced has ruined Destin in many ways. And, property values on the harbor, they haven't increased in, I have a lot of stake in property around this town. And in 20 years, our property at Harbor Docks was more valuable 20 years ago than it is today. That's just weird. That's unusual, and it's concerning to me. So to do the same thing over and over again and expecting different results is insane. And it is a quality of life issue. People, lots of folks don't want a vacation here, and we've seen the mass exodus to 30A. And a result of that is quality of life issues. But I have, we have 4 council members on here that voted for the comp plan that passed the meeting before I was elected. We have 1 council member on the LPA who voted affirmatively to send this to us. And I've heard no strong objection to what's in front of us until tonight, which we've discussed this and voted on this to move it forward and move it forward 4 times maybe, and we've had 2-3 workshops on it. Councilwoman Ramswell voted against it, so she has a pass here. But we go from one extreme of incredibly high density to 50 feet, and I haven't heard any real meaningful objection to this until tonight, which begs the question. We have 5 council members who have voted to progress this forward to where we are tonight. And so it's frustrating that we spent many, many months on this. And we're now just getting this objection. I was waiting for it to get pulled back to the middle. I'm happy to give concessions. I'm happy to make the increases that Mr. Destin has asked for. That's it.
I have no further discussion. Reminder, we have changed to 6 stories and 75 feet, plus the additional changes that Mr. Destin recommended in his motion. We have a motion, we have a second. If I don't see any further discussion, I call for the vote.
Just on Carter's, right?
Yeah, just on mine.
We have 4 yes, 2 noes, 1 abstention. Motion passes.
Excuse me, Mayor, I'd like to ask our land use attorney a question. Based upon the changes, will this then need to come back again for first reading?
Yes, and it will also go back to LPA.
Okay, thank you.
And Mr. Dixon, just so, Pete, can you briefly state your reasoning for your abstention?
My wife works for a company that is fixing to develop the property on Highway 98. And also my daughter is a representative of the law firm representing them.
I have a question for Ms. Scott. So if we pass this again after it goes to LPA and back to us on first reading, it goes to the Department of Economic Opportunity?
Correct.
Okay, and that's not they don't necessarily rubber stamp and just send it back to us. I mean, what are they checking for? Legal sufficiency?
Yeah, they will, and they may come back with some red line tweaks or not, and then they'll send it back to you, and you'll have second reading.
Okay. What's the time frame?
For everything. LPA, another 2 readings. Probably the state technically has 30 days each time. We'll go to them twice, so maybe 3 to 5 months.
It goes to them twice, so it will go to them after we pass first reading.
Yes, and then it will.
Consent agenda.
Yes, and then it will go back to them after second reading.
If they have changes, red line tweaks, like you called them, they'll send it back to us. It has to go back to LPA, back to us.
Yes, so you'll have first reading, it will go to the state, it will go to LPA, it will go to you for second reading, it will go back to the state, and then you'll be done. Well, after the appeal period passes, you'd be done.
And if I could just say, I know that the state is required to have their 30 days, but there have been instances where communities have waited longer than the 30 days to receive it back from the state. So I just want to make sure that the expectation is realistic, that the state could possibly hold on to it longer than 30 days. Of course, we'll hope that they don't.
Question on that. In the interim, any applications are still processed under the old standards?
Correct.
Okay.
Let's move to item number 7. There were no consent agenda. There were no items pulled from this. If I could have a motion to pass it.
I'll make that motion, Mayor.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion. I have a second. Mr. Destin seconds. All those in favor, please. Any discussion? All those in favor, please vote yes. Or yes.
Come on, Rodney.
Rodney.
Wake up.
Hey, thank you, Mayor. I only have one comment.
No.
Consent agenda. My bad.
Did you fall asleep over there?
Unanimous yes. We're going to take a 5-minute break and then move to council members. Ladies and gentlemen, if you'll return to your seats, let's get this meeting done. Good. Please return to your seats. Captain Nix has been on duty since 4 a.m. this morning. I'd like to get him home.
He just wants to keep on plugging, don't take any breaks. Bring your own porta potty up here.
We'll now turn to the segment for the council members to speak individually. Councilmember Braden.
I'm up again.
Yeah.
Miss Land Use Attorney. Over here.
Stop.
Can I get a little bit of clarification on the when that changes we made to the comp plan to Chapter 1, when that will go to the LPA, and when that will be coming back?
We will put it on the LPA meeting for this month. The agenda deadline is this Wednesday, so we can make the changes tomorrow, and it'll be heard on the 16th.
And it'll come back to us next meeting? Well, no.
It would be the first meeting in December.
Okay.
For advertising and all of that.
Thank you so much. And the only other comment I have is for Gulf Power. Ask them if they will please quit sending their crap to my house. I don't read it. It goes straight in the garbage. And that's all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
Councilmember Ramswell.
Thank you. I actually had two questions I wanted to follow up on. Before you were here, the Public Works and Safety Committee had been bringing up an issue repeatedly, and we finally addressed it here. It was the dip in Highway 98 right before and after Big Kahunas. And at one point, I know Mr. Campbell had looked into it, and FDOT had looked into it, and there was some problem with the sewer, not the sewer, the piping or something underneath had collapsed, so they were having to do temporary fixes. My point to all this is it's really bad again in both places. Is that going to be addressed with this widening? Because it's a danger.
I will ask that question and find out for you.
And then my second question is, I know at one point we had talked about the fencing that was just put up along here on Indian Trail, and there was going to be a project, a landscaping project, perhaps by the Boy Scouts. Is that still in the works? Because nothing's been done.
I will also look into that for you.
Awesome. I heard that there was an excellent open house. I couldn't make it, but I heard it was fantastic. So sorry I couldn't be there, but I'm sure some of these other folks that were able to make it can share their experiences. So thanks so much.
Yes, thank you. I've got a couple small things, and one is on the road that we were just talking about, the striping of that road and the way it's striped. It looks like, and I may be wrong, that we've got passing lanes on that road that was just striped out front here, and in my opinion, right here. Right here. Yes. Okay. And in my opinion, the passing lanes should not be there. I mean, they've got multiple buildings that they got to turn into, and if a car is passing, just take a look at that. I don't think it's correct. Something's wrong. It just, on that short of a road, it wouldn't seem like with much stuff as we have here that we'd be allowed, or anybody be allowed to pass. So the passing lanes looks like they're in the worst position they could be. In my opinion, that should be a double yellow line all the way through there, but I am certainly not a road engineer at all. I'm just saying that that just does not look right. So If you would, take a look at that for me.
Yes, sir, I'll get clarification for you on that.
All right. And the next thing is that, and Chatham may bring this up, and I hope he does, is that the take a kid fishing thing, and Chatham will talk to this, and I just want to thank Harb Docks and all the fishermen that participate in this, and this is something that is fantastic for this area. It's at a great time of the year, and I know the kids have a great time, and Chatham, I hope you talk a little bit about that. Thank you. That's all I have for tonight.
Councilmember Foreman. Councilmember Marler.
One quick thing, it will be my privilege to sing the national anthem this coming Saturday at the Veterans Run at the American Legion, so I hope all can be there and run or support the runners.
Councilmember Destin.
Nothing, Mayor.
Councilmember Morgan.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, thanks, Tuffy. That is all my dad. For 20 years, we've been taking underprivileged kids fishing. We took 300 kids fishing this year. Rent out the whole charter boat fleet in Destin. They give us a good discounted rate. Carrie Harbarger feeds all the kids ice cream. Guys, yeah, for sure. But it's great, and the idea behind it is we've been very fortunate to make a living in this community, and the hope with charity and children is that of those 300 kids, a couple of them are going to turn out to be really, really successful, and they're going to remember that and kind of get that altruistic streak at a young age. So, but that is all my father, and I'm a proud son because of it. Also, sometimes it's hard for, we deal with a lot of crap up here sometimes, and it's not a very fun job, but I'm now a father, and my kid's 1 year old, and so we took her to the Fall Fest that Lisa Firth and Lance put on at the community center, and it was a really wonderful thing, and it's something that I'm really proud of in this community. They did a great job, and it was awesome. I do have a little bit of business, and Jeff, if you could look into us talking to the gentleman from Mobile that came to talk about bond financing, and if you could look into an authorizing resolution that makes it easier to wrap the due diligence costs associated with the bond financing, like arbitration costs and stuff, that essentially the bond would cover it and we could reimburse our general fund to make the city whole.
Yeah, what's his name again?
I can't remember. I spoke to him after the last meeting.
Okay, yeah, I'll do that.
Thank you. That's it.
Excuse me. Land Use Attorney, Ms. Kopp.
Nope, thank you.
City Attorney, Mr. Burns.
It's just one little housekeeping issue. The contract I have with the city does allow me to use my associates at my firm if I need some backup work, and this electrical utility job that we were tasked to do has required some extra time. He did 32 public records requests on each one of the municipalities and counties and whatnot that Gulf Power serves, and he did a little bit of research that Chef and I both agreed needed to be done after our last meeting, and so I was just wanting some direction. It's okay for me to use other attorneys in my firm for work, correct? Thank you.
But just as a reminder that it is the city manager who approves the invoices for contract, and as I explained to Mr. Burns, that we will look, and if it's justified work, then we of course will pay the invoice. I just need to make sure that we know exactly what it is that we are paying for the time.
I'm fine submitting my invoices straight to the council if need be, but we do need to get paid. So.
That's not how the contract reads, and the city manager approves all invoices on contracts.
If we're going to have a big blow-up over this, he works at the behest and the pleasure of the council, as do you, correct? I don't want to have an issue. You guys can work together. I'm confident of this, but we want him to be available to do anything he needs to do, and we want you to be able to be comfortable with it. If he needs to itemize each moment, he'll do that.
I understand that, sir. And
So
it
where's
was
the
that,
issue?
It was the last minute that I was just told that he was going to bring this up, and I asked him to please allow us to sit down and meet with the finance director and go over the invoice before he brings us to council. All I want is the opportunity to verify the work that's on the invoice rather than coming to council and asking council for permission on something that is what the city manager is responsible for, which is approving invoices for contracts. So it didn't have to be a big issue. I had asked the opportunity to sit down and discuss this before it was brought before council.
I want to circumvent any issues, and if we need to remove that from you to have us look at every single invoice, then we can do that because we have that authority. But if there isn't going to be a problem, let's just keep moving forward amicably, and because at the end of the day, you may have what you think is a contractual right to review all the invoices, but he works for the council.
Whatever's the pleasure of the council at this point, sir. As I said, I tried to ask for the opportunity to work this out amicably. If the council wishes to take over the payment of invoices for the city council, then that absolutely is something that the council can decide to do.
I think we need to work this out behind the scenes. I think we need the mayor, if we could, and the city manager and the city attorney to sit down and iron some of this out. And I think it does need to come up at city council meetings. So please, if you would, mayor, city attorney, city manager, please meet behind the scenes and work this out. Thank you.
We will do, Councilman Dixon. The only reason I brought it up was he has done work for the city numerous times in the past, and we've been paid for it. But I believe there was an issue with him working on this project for some reason, and he did do some extensive work. It's not going to be very expensive because our rate is extremely low, but it's not going to be astronomical, the invoice. And so, but we were told basically it was not going to be approved by an email.
And let me just say this, that I feel a little bit in general tension. If you would, Mayor, let's please deal with that as well.
I will. Can we meet tomorrow?
Yes, sir, we can meet at your pleasure.
I can meet by phone tomorrow or in the evening.
What day would be convenient for you to meet with us?
Wednesday.
Wednesday?
Yeah.
I don't have my calendar in front of me, but let's, 10 o'clock Wednesday? Can we set that as a tentative? Give me
earlier than that or late in the afternoon. We'll get time together.
Okay. I'll contact two of you. Mr. Dixon, we will work this out.
Thank you, Mayor.
If there's no further discussion, I adjourn the meeting. Oh, public.
Going once, going twice, before you get into that gavel.
Meeting's adjourned.